after having 16 life sentences handed down to me and $16 million and a very particular sequence of events taking place in order for me to be sitting here having this conversation with you.
What's up, everybody? Today's episode features Tim McBride, author of the book Saltwater Cowboy, about his days as a smuggler in South Florida. Check it out. Tim makes me look like a nickel and dimer. In his era of operation from the late 70s to the late 1980s, Tim smuggled in over 1.5 million pounds from Colombia and Jamaica.
We load our boat from this mothership with bales that are stacked not underneath the deck. They're on the bow, as high as, just so the radar can turn. And they're stacked as high as 10, 12 feet on the deck of the boat, all the way back to the back of the boat.
He quite literally is, ladies and gentlemen, the biggest importer of pot in American history.
And I hear their story and their claim to fame, 1 million pounds, and Flatshorn's 500,000 pounds, and Brian O'Day, some 3/4 or 500,000 pounds coming out of the Gulf of Alaska, and George Young and his story about smuggling. And I take all these guys and I put them in a pile and I went, dude, that's not even a year's work.
And we have him here on The Connect. Tim worked with cartels in Jamaica, in Colombia, the Cocaine Cowboys in Miami. He was part of that whole empire, smuggling in tons, literal tons, 50 to 100 tons at a time from Colombia to the shores of South Florida.
From where we sit, for every 1 pound that you seize from whoever or us, 100 make it through.
He got busted in the late 80s in one of the biggest federal takedowns in law enforcement history. He did 5 years in federal prison. He turned his life around. He became a jailhouse lawyer. He got out on appeal. And then years later, he's written this book, Saltwater Cowboy. I don't want to give any more away. This is a fascinating story. We couldn't even fit in everything into this episode. So if you want to hear even more detail about Tim's empire, go to patreon.com/theconnectshow for the bonus episode with Tim. And without further ado, you guys, I give you Tim McBride, the #1 pot hauler in American history, right here on The Connect.
It was just one particular sequence of events after another that led me to become an outlaw.
That's when I see the lights behind me start to flash. And I didn't even think, I just hit it. I was driving like my life depended on it. And then I parked the car, hopped out, closed the door, and I started running.
And he pulls out a burner, a shank, it's like 6 inches. And then he passes it to me. And he goes, here, that's yours. Don't ever leave the cell block without this. He was the reason I made it out of that place alive.
Tim McBride, how many pounds of pot did you haul in your day? Have you ever calculated?
Well, yeah, actually just a rough calculation based on, the amounts that I was involved in moving. It's roughly 30 million pounds.
30 million pounds.
Yeah, some 13,500 tons, I think it comes to, something like that.
So is it safe to call you the #1 pot hauler in American history? With those kind of numbers?
Well, you know what? No, I would have to say no.
But isn't it true, Mr. McBride, that you, at least in your group, the Saltwater Cowboys, isn't it safe to say that that region of Southwest Florida is responsible for importing more cannabis to the United States than any other group? Because who else?
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, I'll agree to that. Because at that time, and even today, when I'm being interviewed and, and I go back to newsreels and whatnot, even the United States government and news agencies describe my little place in this earth, Chokoloskee and Everglades City, as the marijuana smuggling hub of North America.
Sure.
During those days.
I believe it. Because who was the competition? I don't even think the Mexicans were operating.
No, this was when you bought Mexican weed in those days, you got a bag full of leaves.
Right. Okay. So now I have to, let's talk about that really quick.
Okay.
In your book, Saltwater Cowboy, which everybody needs to go out and get, you really poo-poo Mexican cannabis. However, they were the first ones to create the sensimilla, the sin semilla. They isolated the female plant, right? Got rid of the male.
Right.
They were the ones that actually came out with better bud than the Colombians. They effectively put the Colombians out of business in many ways, which is who you were hauling for.
Yes. I mean, that's an interesting take on that, and with regards to the history of what you call sensimilla, the seedless plant in Spanish. The forerunners, I think, or comparably accoladed would be the Jamaicans and their ganja, and what they describe even in those days as the virgin bud man.
The virgin bud.
The virgin bud.
And what did that mean? That
was the virgin bud being the female virgin plant.
Right.
They understood the significance of trying to keep as much male as you could away from the plants, as it was. They understood that. That's why ganja, in my opinion, in those days, collectively with regards to Caribbean marijuana, that was the top shelf. That's the go-to right there.
So you think you hauled for primarily Colombians, correct?
Primarily Colombian red bud and gold bud, and some Santa Marta stuff out of or Punta Roja out of Santa Marta.
Okay, so let's go through those tiers really quickly because there were different levels to it. You were primarily hauled the commercial stuff.
Yes.
And that was called what?
That was Colombian red.
And this is out of
the lowland. This is lowland Colombian marijuana coming off of the rivers and the lowlands closest to the coast.
Right.
The highland stuff, now you begin to get into sativas and more well-kept, higher quality strains. That's why and it's more expensive because you have to go inland. You're not going to buy huge boatloads of this stuff because you got to go inland for it.
Right. And they could produce less of it, right?
Yeah. And I'm paying $10 a pound for the stuff that I'm getting in those days. $10. They're getting as much as $40 to $60 a pound because the quality's better.
Right.
And it's more of the virgin bud. Right. Which we're speaking of. That's why it was more potent and more equal in price, but less amount, but more equal in profit. That's why it was more prevalent to have airplane loads of that shit dropped than boatloads of it, because you could fly an airplane inland, and a DC-3 you could get as much as 6,000 pounds loaded. And
that was nothing to you. 6,000 pounds, two and a half tons ain't shit.
No, but if a guy comes to me and says, I don't want to land my plane, I want to fly over and drop the shit. And there's a story in the book about that very thing, and raining, bales down out of the sky and us picking them up out of the water. That's Santa Marta, that's Punta Roja, that's the inland expensive stuff. So that dollar amount that you can receive back on it is comparable to the larger loads, but everybody wanted Colombian gold and Colombian red, was the go-to.
What about the Jamaican stuff now? What did that cost, and what quality was that compared to?
The Jamaican stuff was anywhere between $15 and $20 a pound.
And
depending on, who and when and
that was for virgin bud?
That was for the virgin bud. That was for the ganja.
Gotcha.
The stuff that gave the Ethiopian Zion Coptic Church their claim to fame.
Right.
That was part of their religion. And Brother Love, who brought that religion to Star Island in Miami, because under the guise of our Constitution being that, freedom of religion, so being a member of the Ethiopian Zion Coptic Church and marijuana and smoking ganja part of our religion, well, your government should allow that. Well, they're wrong. They showed Brother Love how wrong that was.
Sure.
And there's a funny story about that. You may or may not know it, when he was being subpoenaed for that very thing, for marijuana.
Oh, sure.
At the gates of their mansion on Star Island, there's cameras and news people all around this poor little guy in a white shirt and a black tie handing the subpoena through the gates, and Brother Love walking with two guys behind him, and he's got shorts on, gnarly dreadlocks, and just a bro,
He's the tall, skinny guy in the movie The Square Grouper. That is featured in Square Grouper, right?
Yes.
Yeah, he's like a white guy from the north, like you.
Yeah, but he was running the Ethiopian Zion Coptic Church in the United States from Jamaica, from the Blue Mountains in eastern Jamaica.
Okay.
He brought the Zion Coptic to the Star Island under the guise of the U.S. Constitution, thinking, we're going to make this connection, but government wasn't going to allow that part of the Constitution to be read that way.
Right.
So that became that's when he got subpoenaed, and you can find this on YouTube. It's very funny. He gets handed the subpoena to the gate, and he just takes it and hands it to the guy behind him. The guy, hands it back to him. And while the little old man is explaining to him through the fence about the subpoena, right? Love's got this thing, and he reaches into this pouch hanging from his pants. He's got no shirt on. He's just a gnarly looking dude, right? With his dreads, and grabs a handful of ganja, puts it in the subpoena, rolls it up like this and lights it and starts smoking it right in front of the guy.
Yeah. He was a real renegade. He was out of his mind.
Because it's God's herb.
Yeah.
And it says so in the Bible. And Ethiopian Zions in Rastafari, Haile Selassie, Ethiopia.
You guys, today's episode is brought to you by Surfshark, the world's #1 VPN virtual private network. You guys have probably heard about this by now. Obviously, we know we're all getting tracked. Google, all the major search engines, they track you whenever you click accept on that cookies button, you guys. All of your information is being shared to hackers, to data merchants, data brokers. You guys, you got to get a VPN. Go over to surfshark.deals and check out Surfshark One. They offer virtual private networks, antivirus protection, anonymous logging in and searching. So, I mean, you can literally be anywhere in the world and log in and search something. The government could not trace you. You can get cheaper flights that way too. I booked my flight to Europe using a virtual private network using Surfshark One, and I got a cheaper ticket because the airline couldn't trace where I was at. I bet you guys didn't know that. This is the way of the future, you guys. This is how you protect your privacy. It's how you protect the little privacy that you have left from the government, from all of these predatory data people that want to take your information. Information is the new gold. That's the new land, right? That's how companies are getting rich. Well, protect yourself. Plus, you can go use it for streaming. You can find Netflix shows in any language, in any country. I can be in Bangladesh if I wanted and use Surfshark One, and I can watch Moroccan Netflix shows if I wanted. I mean, this thing's incredible. There's so many uses beyond just protecting yourself. You guys go over right now to surfshark.deals and use the promo code CONNECT to get 83% off your purchase. Plus, when you sign up for 24 months, you'll get 3 bonus months for free. Are you guys hearing that? Are you morons picking up what I'm putting down? 83% off of your purchase when you use promo code CONNECT. I love Surfshark. I'm so happy they're sponsoring the show. I use this product. I use all of the products that I sponsor, but this is one of my favorites. You guys, protect your identity. Go over to surfshark.deals and use that promo code CONNECT and protect your privacy online. All right, let's get back into the show. So this comes out of the same time, the same generation, the mid to late 70s that you relocated to Southwest Florida and started hauling pot from Colombia. So you basically have the U.S. has 2 plugs. It's Jamaican and it's Colombian. Did you ever have a plug in Jamaica the way you did in Colombia?
Oh, yeah.
So did you actually go to Jamaica and meet them?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We moved millions of pounds of Jamaican shit. You know, when we were talking earlier about Mr. Flatshorn, rest his soul, you know, the Black Tuna Gang, and being interviewed as he was on that trilogy documentary of Square Grouper, rather. Why did they never ask you to do that? Well, Corbin Brothers. These are the guys, by the way, that made the Cocaine Cowboys famous documentary. Right. Cocaine Cowboys 2, The Story of Griselda Blanco, and that as such, and the trilogy, which is Zion Coptics, Black Tuna, and Everglades City.
That's right.
But when it came time to that, nobody really wants to talk to these people, you know. And you know, Corbin, I'll give him his just dues. He's a great documentarian. I love his reenactments, his caricatures, his drawings, his cartoonish type of things that he does. You know, it's very interesting. But anyways, he really missed the mark when it came to Everglades City. You know, he dropped the biggest story he could have gotten his hands on, because in the documentary, the people that he's speaking to, I know each and every one of these people he's talking to. Only 3 of those people had any credibility whatsoever to be talked to.
Right.
I wouldn't have talked to the guy, to be honest with you.
Why? Why are you talking to me and not a guy that's got a network documentary? Because
he proved to me what the value of the story really meant to him, and it was more about telling a story in a twist of his own. Because what he had done, and the reason I say this is when if any of you recall the story as it was shown on Square Grouper. The guy in the ball cap with the white hair and white beard sitting in a big comfy chair, that's Jimmy. I grew up with Jimmy. Jimmy and I partnered on a lot of jobs together. He was one of only 3 people in that video that had any credibility at all. But what they had done was while he's explaining how all the arrest had been taking effect, and we'll get to that, Operation Peacemaker, and how everybody was being given life sentences for shit a year ago they were giving 18, 12 months and shit to, and they left out how that explanation justifies everybody wound up telling on everybody back and forth like that, only because, and that's where they began the recording. Everybody told on everybody back and forth like that. And made him, and when I first saw Jimmy after that came out, he didn't say, "Hi, Timmy, it's been years since I've seen you, but I love you, man. I haven't seen you." All he did was profusely apologize for the way they took him out of context.
Right. Yeah.
And did that to him.
So
unless you know the story about why everybody told on one another because they were given immunity from prosecution, I didn't give.
Okay. We'll get to all this. We're going to tell the story. We're going to tell the real story of the pot hauling empires of South Florida, starting with you.
Right. When it comes to the Zion Coptics and George and Flatchhorn, what I was getting with Flatchhorn, just quickly, not to go off cue with you here, was to end that little tale I was telling, is when they were interviewing Flatchhorn during the Square Grouper trilogy, he mentions that he and his crew were doing a fraction of what other people were doing. And who he was alluding to was us in Everglades City.
Saltwater Cowboys.
Right. And that's what prompted me to write this book, because I'd heard of the Zion Coptics. I'd worked with the Zion Coptics. We'd moved millions of pounds of Jamaican shit right down through Star Island, right down. I mean, you can see Miami Beach, for Christ's sake, from there. And, and I hear their story and their claim to fame, 1 million pounds, and Flatchhorn's 500,000 pounds, and Brian O'Day, some 3/4 or 500,000 pounds coming out of the Gulf of Alaska, and like this, and George Young and his story about smuggling weed. And I take all these guys and I put them in a pile, and I went, dude, that's not even a year's work for us.
you guys, you want
to hear a story, brother? Sit your ass back, because here comes the story.
You ate George Young's lunch. He was a nickel and dimer compared to you, Timmy.
Yeah,
because he wasn't bringing it in. He was just getting it. This is before he became, this big time cocaine legend.
Right.
You guys were the offloading site. You literally were the first ones to touch it before it got to the U.S.
Before 99% of people that were smoking weed, we probably had our hands on it before you did.
Yeah.
And I only say that, and back to you asking me about being the biggest and pot hauler in the history. That may be true, but I can't speak for myself. All I can do is tell you and tell you guys, what I did and exactly how it was done. And, without embellishment. And I've been asked about embellishment, and I would retort, to embellish on what I had written or the story that I had told would have first done two things. It had first come out sounding so ridiculously stupid, nobody would believe you in the first place. And second of all, it would put it past the realm of human possibility. And that was the edge on which we were working.
Right.
You couldn't very much do more than what we were doing,
And truly, when I grew up hearing these stories, I thought it was unbelievable. So I do understand why some of these people who watch the show, some of these trolls on YouTube,
I get the haters
are
for sure.
incredulous, because there will never exist a group and people like you again in the drug trade, because it simply isn't possible. You grew up at a time where radar was just becoming a thing.
Yes.
Where there was hardly any federal Coast Guard law enforcement.
They were very few and far between.
You were paying everybody, all the local pigs, all of the you had lookouts everywhere. You guys were like the Soviet Union in the way that you had eyes.
This was a
everywhere.
So
let's get into that.
Very sophisticated in its evolution.
Yeah. So you're
for
born,
3 generations.
You're born in North Carolina,
right?
Grew up till you're like 10 or 11.
Just before high school years.
Yeah. You relocate to Wisconsin.
My father took a job out of 82nd Airborne in North Carolina.
Okay.
Took a sales position.
And you get into smoking weed in high school, just like everybody else.
Right.
Mind is blown by it. And you kind of seem like this guy that just goes with it. You don't seem like much of a long-term thinker, no offense.
Right.
You're just like, oh, I got a job here in Hollywood. Let me come out and see what this is about. You come out here for a year. You work for Sammy Davis, converting
television to VHS, because you wanted to watch TV without commercials.
Yeah, hilarious. You get sick of that, and then your buddy from Wisconsin says, "Hey, I'm going down to work at this crab shack. It's like a restaurant,
fish house.
It's a fish house
where they bring your catch in, and they cook it and package it, and in this case, send it to right to the restaurants in Miami.
Okay.
Direct catch
Gotcha.
fish house. So
Gotcha.
literally fish, literally crab.
Yeah.
And we're working the vessels that source that.
Yeah. So the crab boats.
Yes.
You knew you were going down to work on the boats.
No, my buddy Mark did.
Gotcha.
I went down without any intentions other than, like you said, and I mentioned in my book, that if something came along that sounded like a good deal, I'm going to do it, because I never wanted to be the guy to kick myself in the ass later on and go, fuck, I wish I'd have done that.
Yeah.
And I even say quoting the book, I'm not that guy standing in the back of the crowd on my tiptoes looking to see what the fuck's going on. I'm that guy elbowing my way to the front because there's some shit going on, man. I went in on it.
Right? That's right. That's right.
That's me. And if something ever, and that's why the call, boom. Yeah, I'm going tomorrow. Okay, I'm with you, bro. So that's where we went. But I went down to help his brother-in-law and sister build their new home.
Okay.
So I had something to do. He had a job on a crab boat.
And tell us where this is in Southwest Florida.
This is on two little islands that collectively create the town of Everglades City and the island of Chokoloskee. Total population, even today, is just under 500 people.
Wow. That's on the island.
On both islands.
Wow. And that makes up Everglades City.
That's the entirety of Everglades City.
Wow.
And it won't grow beyond that.
Because of the hurricanes?
Well, no. They're not making any more island, man.
Right.
There's only so much space that you can build on.
Right. Sure.
And a lot of the space that's of any significance our founding families own, shit like that. Because this culture, with regards to Everglades and eking out a living off of nature, including stone crabbing, which is what we did, catching alligator and catching birds for the plumes in the 30s and the 40s with the ladies from New York, like the big hats and stuff.
Yeah.
That was a thing.
Oh, wow.
At that time, several of the founding families, the Browns, the Hamiltons, and the it'll come to me. But anyways, they were getting their mail and supplies that they needed by sailboat from Key West at that time.
Wow.
In the late 1800s, and they actually eked out a living in learning how to do this. And over the years, it became Chokoloskee and Everglades City as it is today. Still, population 500 people.
Wow, and everybody's making their living crabbing,
somehow
working on the fishing boats,
or they're fishing or they're stone crabbing still today, but not on the magnitude of that we were back in that day. And
you had never sold drugs when you moved to Florida?
No, I'd always went to Tommy, the weed guy in town, where I went to high school in Wisconsin. Yeah. Didn't come to Florida with any assumptions or aspiring to haul pot or anything like that. I didn't even know about it, till I got there, and you'd hear these stories, but that's all they are. They're just ghosts in the night, and until you actually become one of them, then that's ultimately what happened.
And then how long before you made your first journey on the crab boat?
Probably about 6 months after I got there. I had just finished building a home, building Mark's brother-in-law and sister's home. And it was coming into full-blown crab season, and that's from October 15th to May 15th is the season. So we're coming into the fall. We're just October, November, because we come out at the end of the summertime. And, to get the job on the boat right at the beginning of season. So they just start the crab season, October 15th. So we're running around that time in 1979. And
you're 21 years old.
I'm just turned, I'm 21 years old. And I'm club wise because drinking age in Wisconsin, where I came from, was 18. Everywhere else was 21. So we've been clubbing for 3 years by that time. By the time I turned 21. So it was, going to the bars and the clubs in town and stuff was old news to me at that time even, but getting this job, happened as a matter of course. So, Captain Red, who I named in the book, his name is actually Billy Potter, just a wonderful human being, just a dear guy. Wanted to get, back into the pot hauling because it was that time of year. I mean, it was pot hauling season.
So, yeah, that's right.
And
harvest season coincides with crabbing season.
Exactly.
I didn't know that.
Yep. So what he didn't like was the fact that the guy that was working with him on the boat at the time with Mark Clark, my buddy, was this guy from Michigan that they didn't really know his origins or anything about him, where he came from. They're crabbing pullers is what they're called. when you work on the stern and you're a stone crab and you're a puller like I was, you might do that 1, maybe 2 seasons, and then you've had enough because it is ball busting, ass breaking work.
Hard ass work. Yeah.
It'll make a man out of you for sure. If you go beyond those number of seasons, and most guys are turnover, and they'll do it for a couple of months and they're like, fuck this, and it's because the turnover is big. So he didn't really know this guy. So they worked him for a week and they worked his ass off and he quit, because it's possible to do that. So that's when they said, get Timmy and let's go, put Timmy on board. So now it's me, Mark, who's Clark in the book, and Billy. So they had imparted to me and told me how a stone crabbing operation works. You get on the boat early in the morning, 3:30, 4 o'clock, depending on how far you have to steam to get to your first line. By line, I mean we have, ultimately we had 6,000 traps, individual stone crab traps, and we have pictures of those, I believe, what they look like. And they weigh about 50, 60 pounds each because there's 7 inches of concrete in the bottom of these things. So when you push them off the back of the boat, they have to land top up so the crabs can get in the funnel on top. And we have to go through 600 of these a day.
Oh my God.
So we put 300 in one direction, and that's direct, and they're spaced about 30 yards apart. And that line runs about anywhere from 17 to 20 miles. Then you skip over about 50 yards or so and you pull the other 300 back the same way you came. So you're not twice as far away from home. You're right back where you started from. We have 600 here, 600 here, 600 here, in 10 different spots, 6,000 traps. We go to a different spot each day.
And the traps are all connected on one line?
Each one has a single rope and a buoy.
Okay, gotcha.
Similar to what you see on, if you're familiar with Deadliest Catch. It's the same type of scenario. And I don't by any means compare the two because I wouldn't fucking do Alaska fishing to save my ass, dude. You wouldn't get me on one of those fuckers. But the scenario is the same. We don't have the dual bag system that you have to grab the rope because they're pulling 1,000-pound trap plus it's catch. So they're pulling over 1,000-pound piece of, trap up. They're using rope that's anywhere from 600 to 800 feet long.
Oh, wow.
But the mechanism that they use a throw a grapple hook.
Right.
We've got a 3/8-inch nylon line on our 60-pound trap or 50-pound trap and a buoy about the size of a soccer ball, styrofoam. And we reach out with a catch pole, we call it. Mine was made, and each puller makes their own customized catch pole. Mine's about 6 foot long, made out of 1 by 1 inch pressure treated lath with a shark hook with the barb ground off of it as the catch, fiberglassed and fashioned on the end of it. So I reach out and grab the buoy underneath, the rope underneath the buoy, and pull the buoy up through a block and tackle system that's hanging there. And it goes around that spinning disc that you see on Deadliest Catch, that big giant disc. That's called a shiv. And it's literally looks like a pipe, 2 pipe hands together like this, 2 pipe plates. And when the rope gets in between it, it cinches that rope and pulls on it. So to keep the rope from completely spinning around, there's another piece of metal sticking out called a knife. And all that is designed to do is kick the rope back out. Then it goes into a coiler for them because they got a lot of goddamn rope. Ours is coiling at our feet because we're at the most 80 feet. Different depths of water require different lengths of line. So,
and how does, as you're going along now, you're 20 miles offshore, you've got hundreds.
Or we're right on shore. We can see,
Oh, I thought you said the line went 20 miles.
Well, 20 miles in one direction. If we're working short lines on a shoreline, we'll run them along the shoreline.
Okay. So you're close to shore.
Well, we're close enough to see the beach in some instances, but then we're working long lines. Now we're offshore, 8-10 miles, and 8-10 miles offshore of the Everglades, you're only in 20 foot of water.
Yeah.
Still, because it's shallow there.
Yeah.
The depth becomes, as you get northern toward Fort Myers and Tampa, in that area, the water gets deeper.
Gotcha.
At the southern end is the Florida Bay and the Keys, the archipelago of the Keys.
Right.
So this relatively shallow area was where we're catching this delicacy.
And back then,
bull stone crabs, and there's a picture of one that we'll show you as well.
And back then, law enforcement in that remote part of Florida is pretty nil, right?
Yeah. I mean, there were 2 Marine Patrol officers in town. One guy worked the day shift, one guy worked the night shift, and oftentimes there was only one.
And those aren't even feds, I don't think.
No. There's half a dozen National Park Rangers, but one of them was on my crew.
Right. Wow. Okay, so tell us about your first pothole. Tell us about the first day
let's get back
you
to
went out to crab.
Yeah.
Thinking you're going out to crab.
So yeah, the scenario went as I told you, we wake up at dawn, right there, as soon as you can see that first buoy, that's when you start, because we got to get through that 600, at that time it was only about 500 traps. We built our way up and got good at it enough to do that extra. But nevertheless, so I get on the boat that first morning, and we on time, we cast off and shit, and we've got about an hour or 2 or 3 maybe to get to where we're going that particular day, because like I said, we're ashore, we're offshore, we're onshore, depending on where we're at in that set determines the length of. But regardless, I wake up and the sun's up, and I'm thinking, well, they said we start at like dawn, so I lean my head out of the bunk like this, and there's Captain Red, sitting there looking at me, and goes, big grin on his face. He goes, Timmy, he says, we're not going to pull traps today, buddy. He said, we're just going to hang out here all day, off and unload a pop boat from Columbia later on tonight. And I said, okay, cool.
Did you take a pause, or were you just like, it sounds good?
I looked at him and I just took it in stride like I do everything else. And I went, okay, cool. But he knew it, and my buddy Mark knew it, and they kind of shanghaied me and waited till they got me offshore. It was a bit of a tongue-in-cheek thing for them.
Now, how many different crab operations were there at that time in that area? And how many of them
in our fleet? You mean?
So what's a fleet?
A fleet would be the stone crab industry in Everglades City and Chokoloskee.
Okay, so how many different crews are in boats are in that fleet?
At that time, there had to have been, oh my gosh, 15, 20.
And how many of them were involved in pothauling?
Well, let me think. Maybe 15, 20.
Yeah. And it serves as perfect cover because you guys continued to crab legitimately even as you were pothauling.
Well, you had to. I mean, you had to do the work to support and justify the expense of the boat. We're talking about a 51-foot marine management stone crab vessel that's designed to haul these traps, and 600 traps at 50, 60 pounds a piece. Do the math. That's a lot of weight.
Yeah.
And they're perfectly designed to haul traps as well as perfectly designed to throw bail spot on.
Right.
But there's an evolution to that as well. They didn't always come hard packed like you see what people picture in their mind as a bale of pot.
Right. So this is 1979.
This is 79-ish or in the fall, and it wound up being 15 tons that first night.
The very first time you moved drugs,
when I got surprised and offshore,
40,000 pounds a week.
30,000 pounds.
30,000.
15 tons, 30,000 pounds.
What was your first haul? My first time I ever sold drugs, it was 1 gram. Uno. you moved 30,000 pounds.
Right.
I ain't shit. I suck. Okay, so
when you're speaking in terms of that, dude, I have dumped more shit on my crab fishing boots than 20 men could smoke in their lifetime.
Right.
Simply because of what I'm about to tell you, an evolutionary process to this thing. But I went out, we did that. I mean, there's no playbook, there's no rule book, there's no instructions, there's no guide on how to do this.
Right.
You just pull up there, and if you need to, you get on that boat and you help get that load out from below, and then you get on your boat and they start throwing it down to you, and now you're moving.
Hang on. So let's walk us through that. The ship that you're meeting,
right?
That your crab boat is meeting, is the mothership.
Yeah,
that is the ship. And when we say ship, is it like a big commercial ship?
Well, it can be a giant commercial sized freighter.
Yeah,
or it could be a yacht, a large yacht, or shrimp boat. So a
shrimp boat is bigger than a crab boat.
A shrimp boat is vastly bigger hold in it than a crab boat.
So all the pot generally in
crab
these boats
don't have holds.
So in these, because they had holds.
We have a bit of a hold underneath the bow section and a midship a little bit, but the rest is engine compartment and gear, steering mechanisms.
So you wouldn't actually have bales of pot on the deck for people to see. You would?
Oh, dude. I mean, yeah.
Now, and you'd haul during the day with these bales stacked up? Okay, good. No. You came under the cover of night.
What we do is done between the hours of sunset and sunrise.
Right.
The first phase of it.
Right.
That's going off and doing the 15 tons. And by the way, I went the second day I went out stone crabbing on that very boat. Same thing. I woke up. Nope, not again today, Timmy. We're doing 22 tons tonight.
Now you're 2 days in. We're up to 40
2 days
tons
in,
of
I
weed.
haven't seen that first trap, man. You know, I'm thinking, wow, this is okay. So, but I got paid rookie pay,
Right,
$5,000 each night, and I'm thinking, well, still,
you made 10 grand in 2
and
nights.
at that time,
That's like what somebody
an
makes in a
average
year.
blue collar worker is making that in a year.
This
I just
is
made it in
unreal.
2 nights. And
Why would anybody not do that in that area? Why would you not do that? That brought so much economy.
Yeah, but dude, we're just getting started.
Okay, but first of all, so take us end to end how one of those pot shipments moved from the mountains of Colombia all the way to the shores of Southwest Florida.
Now, I didn't understand that part of the mechanism until later,
which we'll get to.
On.
But walk us through it.
But yes, you see vast fields of Colombian red as far as the eye can see through a valley between two mountains. And
this is Santa Marta. For people to know, just for context, geographically, Santa Marta is on the northeast coast of Colombia.
Yes.
So it's the closest.
Barranquilla Peninsula and Barranquilla City is just offshore
right.
and south of that.
Right. And Barranquilla, they have a cartel there, the Cartel de Barranquilla, but this is a long way from Medellin and Bogota.
We're
These
down closer to Cartagena,
cities.
which is on the south end.
So it's Caribbean on this end.
So we're Caribbean. We're more southern between Barranquilla and Cartagena.
Mm-hmm.
To get to the Santa Marta that you're talking about is way north.
Okay, so
and
you're
farther inland.
Right, and that's where the good shit is grown.
That's where the expensive stuff is grown, that $40 to $60 stuff, which you can only get so much of because it's harder to grow.
It's limited.
It's taken care of better.
Yeah.
And where I'm getting it from in these vast fields, as far as the eye can see, is done, by hand.
Mm-hmm.
It's grown by hand, and it's put out on chicken wire, screen mesh boxes to dry and cure. And as they turn them and shake them, the water leaves drop through the screen and become the shake.
And the buds stay on top.
And the buds stay up on top.
Right.
And this whole process of taking a mountainside, to get 40 tons of shit takes a lot of weed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a huge process because you guys in the cannabis business now understand what it takes to cure and dry and shit like that. Well, it's no different. You can't just take it off the plant and pack it into a bale. It'll be molded by the time it gets to us. So there's that process. And then in the earlier days, when we first began a pot hauling in the late 70s, the bales weren't coming compressed.
Right.
They were only coming as compressed as somebody could do with their foot maybe, or a hand press,
right?
Something to that fashion. And they were coming in all irregular different sizes, man.
Right.
I mean, from 40 pounds to 110, these log looking things. There was no rhyme or reason to it. And by the time we've gotten them, there's no telling how many times they've been handled by that point. And some of them are coming apart and the shake is coming everywhere. And I wrote
you said the shake would get all over your body.
When you're in the bows of these boats and you're moving these things around and they're shaking, seeds flying everywhere. I looked at my buddy Mark one night. We're in this bottom of this huge freighter, and I started laughing, and he says, "What the f- are you laughing at?" And I said, "You look like a sesame seed bun, man. Your face is all seeded like this."
Yeah.
Because that's what Caribbean weed was. It was seedy.
Yeah.
There's no getting away from it.
No, it was garbage compared to. It wouldn't even sell today in America.
No. It wouldn't even be worthy of a test. Because you're talking maybe 7, maybe 12% if you're lucky.
THC.
Yeah, if you're lucky. But we still got stoned off of it.
Right.
That's what you had.
Totally.
That was your daddy's weed. Today's weed ain't your daddy's weed, man.
No.
But that being said, that's the beginning phase of it.
Right.
And
it's put on either a shrimp boat,
a freighter, a shrimp boat, or stuff like that.
Or a yacht.
But understand that even in those days, it wasn't as easy as pulling up to a dock and getting loaded in Colombia and driving off. They had the Navy to contend with. They had the military to contend with as well. They could pay them off for sure. Mm-hmm. But there was... rather than pay them, who wants to pay the military, or the Navy, for protection, because it costs, and that drives the cost they have to spread to me. So there goes the $10, or whatever like that. Plus, if they find your shit wherever you're packaging or wherever these big, and there's a lot of different areas taking place, because when I'm going down there ultimately, or my progenitors who we learned from, the first 2 generations of us learned from, was you're getting on different grades because they're grown by different people, different areas. So you're getting different grades of pot. But back to the bales. The compression stuff wasn't there. So when we're getting them, then they're nasty shit. And we get this shit on the shore. Now we got to give it to the smaller boats. Now, here's where I have to tell you the scenario by which the rest of the mechanism works. We load our boat from this mothership with this stuff with bales that are stacked not underneath the deck. They're on the bow. They're on the sides around the windows. They're on the deck of the top of the wheelhouse as high as, just so the radar can turn. And they're stacked as high as 10, 12 feet on the deck of the boat, all the way back to the back of the boat.
Wow.
As much shit as we can get on this thing. And in
it's
those days,
it's about an 8-day journey from the tip of Colombia to Southwest
Let
Florida.
me back up. This is from the mothership to us.
Yeah.
Now the mothership, it could take as many as 3 weeks to get a ship loaded sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But there was ways around that too as well, depending on where you went and what coastline you needed to be at. And we had different coastlines that were protected.
Now, do you know, did the Colombians, the way that you guys hauled the pot off of the motherships onto smaller boats and then brought it to shore, is that how the Colombians loaded their ships? Did they take small boats
a lot of times
20 miles out in Colombia and then load them onto the mother?
60% of the time, that's how they got loaded out there too.
Gotcha.
They got loaded, and that's why it would take sometimes a week or so for a boat to get loaded if you're getting any significant amount of shit. And I've seen boats with as much as 200,000 and 300,000 pounds on them when I was a kid.
200,000 and 300,000 pounds. Okay, so the mothership ultimately
then it makes that 8-day trip or so, depending on any weather pattern they may get involved with in the lower Caribbean, and get to Southwest Florida. Just 30 miles is territorial limited water in Florida.
Okay, so they would stay outside of the territorial waters. So they're in international waters still.
Right, they're still in international waters, and it's very rare unless we own that vessel, in which we did a lot of times. We could bring it in closer, and that's just made our job a little bit quicker because once we get to that mothership and load it, like I said, we pull up to it and we either help them get it on deck, and then they throw it down to us, and we put as much as we can get on that boat. And in the earlier days of the bales that weren't compressed, it wasn't a lot of weight. It was more bulk than it was anything weight-wise. And we get into the shoreline and kill our engines because we're at the 10,000 islands. And literally, look this up. I got a picture we can show you, actually, of what the 10,000 islands look like. 25 miles of coastline, 4 miles deep, of literally 10,000 islands. And Chokoloskee and Everglades are one of the inner islands toward the mainland. So we have this labyrinth of islands to go through that we play and goof off in every day. We know this shit like you know your backyard. But to follow us in there, dude, you're gone. We'll leave you lost. We'll leave you lost and leave some guy sitting 2 islands away watching you figure out how lost you are while we're working.
Yeah, law enforcement has no chance. The outsiders, they have no chance.
No.
So how many, if the ship's in international waters now, the mothership, say there's what would be an average load? Just guesstimate.
An average?
On one of those,
40 tons.
Okay, so how many smaller boats, crab boats?
2.
You can load 20 tons on each boat.
We could put as much as 25 tons on our boat and not risk sinking it, because
would they throw the bales down? Like, so say it's a freighter ship.
Right.
So that's a high ass ship. Would you guys actually have to walk up like the plank to grab them, or they just throw them straight down?
Right down on the deck, right at you.
You tell this story about how one time they're unloading a freighter ship and they're throwing so many bales down that the wood of your crab boat starts to like crack.
The fiberglass, you can hear it.
Yeah, under the weight of all of this pot.
Wincing every time one hit the deck, but that was in the little later years when they started compressing the fuckers, but that wasn't uncommon to reach a vessel like that. When their weather deck's 16 feet above ours. We're not getting up there because there's nowhere to tie off. So the captain has to keep the boat up next to the ship while they're throwing that shit down. And we're trying not to get killed by getting hit by one of these. But by our inability to keep up, solved our problem of the boat coming apart because there are piles now. There's a pile there and they're hitting one another.
Right. So it's cushioning the blow.
Cushioning the blow now. So we're like, but we begin to stack them on the bow, on the sides of the boat, on the wheelhouse as high, just so the radar can turn, and straight back. And we can get as much as, 450 pieces maybe. We count them or try to count them, try to keep count. But we also keep an eye on our water line, our deck. with regards to the water line, because the deck and the stern of the boat are what's called scupper holes. And scuppers are what's, they're designed to catch and to drain off any water or rain or any working, material that may, and it just drains out and goes off the deck.
Mm-hmm.
They're on every ship has scupper holes, So we risk getting loaded to the point where those scuppers go underwater. And if those go underwater, the water comes on board, goes into the hole, we sink.
Yeah.
So these guys are throwing this shit and we're thinking, we should have about enough. So we yell up to this guy that's leaning against the rail. He's peeling an orange, right? The captain, I guess. How many more? And he's yelling, 50 more. I'm thinking, okay, 50. So we're counting back. There's only 2 boats because there were 3, but the third boat had to go unload another load that was, some other place. So that's how busy we were. And we only were expected to get 60,000 pounds. So we figured that's just so many pieces, 60,000, 30,000 each. We could, we could do as much as we could. And so the scuppers start to go under, you see the water. So we're cutting life jackets apart and stuffing the foam into the scuppers to keep us from sinking. And we're asked the guy, we all begin, how many more are there? And he yells down, he goes, 50 more.
That's a Latino for you.
This is the only number
50 more. You're good, man.
Yeah,
you're
this
good.
is the only number this guy knows.
Now, how many more were actually left?
Well, dude,
hundreds.
We pulled away.
Oh yeah, because you guys were
going to sink us.
Yeah,
dude, we got to get away from these crazy. Because there had to have been 60 guys on this freighter.
Wow.
And they were lined back to back, down one hatch, open hatch, coming out another hatch on the other side of the deck, back to back with a bale on their shoulder.
It's cartoonish.
Thrown to this boat, thrown to that boat, thrown to this boat. I mean, it was a solid line of guys. There was no break in the line.
That's insane.
And when we pulled away, as far as we could see these guys with binoculars, because we would start typically 3-4 hours before sunrise or sunset to have enough daylight to get loaded and still get, have enough time comfortably to get it inshore, which we'll get to.
So you guys would load while the sun was still up, but you're out of sight of shore. Nobody can see you.
Well, we're offshore.
Yeah.
Plus we're off the horizon of the boat we're going to approach.
Right.
And the horizon on the water is around 10, 11 miles.
Okay.
And by horizon, I mean like if you're driving across the desert and you see things shrinking in the distance and they disappear. Once they disappear, that's the horizon.
Yeah.
For those, well,
yeah. I don't know.
Kids.
You know what? I actually can't say for a fact that our audience isn't that stupid. So there you go, kids. You just learn about what a horizon is.
Yeah. So we'd sit off this horizon.
Yeah.
And that would disassociate us from the vessel being there. We see it on radar, but we don't.
Yeah.
But
so
when it comes time to go, there's a particular call sign attached to every vessel that shows up. And
a particular what?
Call sign.
Call sign.
And we're made privy of that call sign because
what is a call sign?
A call sign is a name, or in this case, it was Felipe Zorro. Felipe Zorro.
And that's what they say over the radio
Our
to let you know.
captain would say that Felipe Zorro.
Mm-hmm.
Felipe Zorro, like that. And then when he heard that Felipe Zorro, come on. We knew that was the boat that he heard us.
It's ready.
And they know now that the boat that's coming to them is the one that should be. So they shouldn't freak out because they see 2 boats coming at them.
Right.
That's our call sign. That means we approach them. So we have the 10 miles to get to them, and it's usually 2, 3 hours, 4 hours before sundown. So we have some time to work. So now we're headed back in, and as the sun's
hang on, I want to stop you right there real quick.
Sure.
In the course of loading these boats, there's so much volume that many bales would just drop in the water. You guys, was that every day, every time? Did you guys lose some product? I imagine it's inevitable.
Well,
right?
it's most likely 99% of the time inevitable.
Yeah.
Particularly in the earlier days when we're talking about the irregularity and the size of the bales and the shape of them, for instance. And they're just stacked up on there, and the boat might swell this way and roll a couple off, hence square grouper.
Right. And that's where square grouper came from.
That's the name square grouper was born.
I imagine if you were like a kid, like a teenager, you could make a business just out of driving your boat around looking for square groupers.
Well, yeah. I mean, there was a lot of the fishing industry is huge in Southwest Florida and always has been. And if they're out there, somebody else is going to find them. And not necessarily go looking for them because there's somebody who might find it before you.
But would people here with like normal
what would
people?
happen typically is if somebody found something floating out there, any sizable amount, and they would say square grouper on the radio, and anybody with a radio on a boat, they'd be out there.
It was just a free for all. It's
free shit, man.
Wow. Free lunch.
But that being said, as we pulled away from that freighter, because risking sinking, we watched them all the way to the horizon. They were still throwing that shit off the boat.
Just into the ocean?
Just got rid of it.
Because they're like, we're not going back with this shit.
There was no going back to it.
Yeah.
No, and
but they're not going to go back. They're not going to go back to Colombia with a
hauling 101 is you never approach a boat twice.
Yeah.
If you don't have to.
Why not?
Well, because you run the risk of, being seen.
But why would the Colombians throw it into the ocean? Because they don't want to go back.
It's not the Colombians shit any longer.
Right.
It belongs to the Cubans who paid us to go get it.
Right.
Because we're paid $175 a pound to go to Colombia, pick it out, and ship it and bring it offshore.
Okay, so we're going to get into that.
Right.
You're loaded now. The crab boat's loaded. You're going away from the mothership. What happens next?
We take about 3-4 hours or so, 5 hours, whatever it takes, however offshore we are, and how fast we can move to get inshore, kill our engines just outside the islands, the 10,000 islands. And once we kill those engines, from out of the islands comes 15, 20, 25 smaller boats that typically have a twin engine 235 Evinrudes on them.
What is that?
Outboard motor.
Do they go fast?
235 horsepower each.
So they go pretty fast.
They're not just fast, they're powerful.
So are we talking 80, 90 on the water?
Well, yeah, if they're empty.
Yeah.
They could very easily get to a 60, 70 mile an hour-ish.
Okay.
There's the hull would restrict you from going a certain speed because hulls are designed, and there's a hull speed, it's called.
Yeah.
You can only put so much horsepower on a particular design of a hull.
Right.
In this case, they're more flat bottom than they are any V bottom to them because they're designed to go through the shallows. We have these boats built specifically to do what we need them to do.
Right.
And there were two brothers in town in Naples, just north of us, who built boats designed particularly for us to do what we needed them to do, and that was to go through these islands shallows.
Yeah.
And they were designed with a horizontal and vertical trim. So not only could you do regular trim like everybody's familiar with, but you could also trim the engine this way, up and down, which meant you could bring the prop right up to beneath the boat. And as long as that prop will go through the water, that boat's going to go through the water.
So you could be in a couple feet of
water. So they've got 30, 40 bales on this boat, and they're taking it through 12 inches of water.
Wow.
And nobody's following
incredible.
you. And they're doing this, and they make as many trips through the islands to Chokoloskee Island, where we've got 1, 2, or 3 of our buddies' houses that are right on the shoreline. They have a dock right on the edge of the island. And it'll literally sack these houses full from the back to the front.
Right.
Living room, kitchen, bedroom, dining room. I mean, everywhere you can stick a bale in this house, it's there because we took the furniture out of it.
So you got 25 boats that come to so you have 3 levels to this.
They're going back and forth.
Mothership, crab ship. What did you call those small boats that brought the product to the stash houses?
They're the offloaders.
Those are the offloaders.
Right.
Didn't you also have a boat? It was like an escape boat.
Right.
Okay, tell us what this is. This is wild.
That's what we call a chase boat.
A chase boat.
That's our when we're offshore, that's our escape vessel. That's our escape valve.
So if you're on a crab boat and
we're loaded down like I said,
down,
if you could see this boat from the air, all you would see is a mountain of pot going through the water with the radar turned in. Like this. I mean, quite literally.
You're sitting ducks if the law's there.
Dude, that's why you do it at night because there's no hiding this shit.
Yeah, there's no hiding.
You can't put this shit below deck. I mean, you got 25 tons of shit on the boat.
So the chase boat is obviously if you got to get in the chase, you jump into that.
Exactly. Because you're only doing maybe at most, maybe 6 knots. I mean, these boats are powerful. These are workhorsing. We've got a Detroit 12-cylinder twin turbo diesel engine in this boat that's powering a 800-pound brass 4-prong prop, and it's humping this load through the water, dude, and it's not moving, but the captain's got radar. When we get the boat loaded, that's when the captain does his work. That's when he's dialed in. He's on the radar. He's keeping track of, not by radio contact. We had what's called a Polaris scanner. You didn't even have to talk on the radio. You just key the mic like this, and the scanner would stop on a 360-degree blinking diode and stop and tell you the direction that mic key came from. So
if you saw something on the Polaris radar as you're bringing it into the offloaders,
no, the Polaris is radio.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Radar is visual. We have 50-mile range, from 50 miles to 30 to 40, 45 to 40, 35, 30, 25, all the way down to 5 miles. The closer that vessel gets, you can tune in on it like that.
Okay. How could you tell that it was a cop coming and not an offloader?
We would watch it. Captain Billy would be tuned in. All the other captains that are running with us, dark and silent, we're all watching this vessel to see what track it's going to take. If it looks like it's going to approach us, we just leave the boat running and get off the fucker and get onto that chase boat. That'll do 70, 80 miles an hour before your ass even hits the seat. We got a picture of one.
And what kind of boat is that?
Mine was a 31-foot, or actually total 35-foot Chris Craft Scorpion with twin 235 horsepower offshore Mercs.
So that bitch is flying.
This is designed to take off-sea, rough water, and designed to take off and just haul ass.
That's like a Ferrari on the water.
Yeah. That's our getaway.
Oh, how many times in your career bringing in a load did you have to jump in the chase boat?
Never had to jump off.
Never? Oh, you guys were so spoiled, you boomers.
But it was always good to know that Johnny, or whoever the guy we were on the chase boat at the time, it was good to look over and see him, him there. Just knowing that he was there was a huge comfort, because we're dead sitting ducking ducks, dude.
Totally.
If somebody decides they're going to come after us. And that was what brings me back to the way the shit was coming in those days. Nasty, dirty. I mean, just shake everywhere. We'd give it offload to the guys, on shore, and then they take it and do the house thing with it.
Right.
Like that.
So they stash.
We'll tell you what happens beyond that in a minute. But getting back to the nastiness, now we would have to go offshore and clean the goddamn boat, man. I mean, we're spending hours of cracks and getting the seeds and shit off the deck and like that. It was just a fucking pain in the dick. And we were doing this for months, each season. And then ultimately, somebody in the first or second of the generations got wise to, in the early 80s, when the advent of the household and commercial trash compactors came on the scene, went, blink, the light went on and said, okay, here's what you guys need to do. And they took some of these compactors down to the jungle and some generators and said, now you start feeding this shit and packing it.
Showed the Colombians how to do it.
This is how the advent of the bale, which everybody knows today, this is the evolution of it.
So, and a bale,
because we were responsible for this shit once we took a hold of it.
Yeah.
We, Colombians didn't own it. Cubans owned it, but we were still responsible for it. Now you're giving us shit that we have to literally, I was sweeping shit in piles on the deck and taking the ice shovel and throwing it overboard. That's how much shit we were cleaning off of our decks. And I told you earlier, I had literally dumped out of my crab boots enough smoke that 20 guys could smoke in a lifetime.
Yeah.
That's how nasty the shit was. We finally, ultimately, Billy, the captain, would bring out rolls of visqueen and duct tape, and we would line the deck of the boat and over the rails and tape it down. So when we got this load and got it off, we'd run offshore instead of doing the hours of cleaning, pull this shit together and tie a chain and an anchor to it and throw it off the boat and be done with it. Yeah. That's when they said, enough of this shit, man. You got to clean this up. So then the bales are getting packed. They're getting easier to handle. Now the loads are getting heavier.
Right. But now at least the bales are uniform.
They're uniformed. They're more easily stackable, let's say.
Right.
And the jobs were quicker, but they got heavier.
They're heavier.
There got to be more.
How much pot could be in one bale?
80 pounds.
80 pounds.
80 pounds.
Right.
And because they were coming in such neat fashion and stackable, the size of loads got bigger. We worked 1 month, 28 nights in a row. Now we're talking about not just our boat, because we could work maybe 3 nights in a row and then we'd have to take a few days off, because that'll kill you, man. You know what I mean?
This is hard work.
Dude, not only stone crabbing make a man out of you, but doing this at night too, dude, you're moving 800 to 1,000 80-pound bales, sometimes 2 times a night. You can only do that for so long and you die. That's why out of a town of just under 500 people, half the town was,
had to have been.
It was.
Had to have been. Now, how much does let's talk about the chain of this conspiracy. How many, what is like
hierarchy?
A worker? Yeah. What's a worker making? And then all the way up to who owns this operation.
Okay.
Yeah. Break that down.
Well, that has to deal too primarily with the second half of how we get it to Miami once we load the house.
Sure.
Now, during the loading of the house at night, a lot of times we're using cars, trucks, vans. I mean, anything that you can stick a bale of pot in. That's how the rest of the town, even the women the gals got involved in being drivers. And the drivers are never they never know where the house is that the shit's being loaded at, because it's always loaded for them.
Right.
So the owner would have it loaded that night while we're loading the house and drive it home and park it in the front yard and just leave it there. So he's been home all night, and then call his driver and say, come and get the truck. And we would tell him where to go in Miami. They would drive that 120 miles. Only one way to in and out of there is Highway 29.
Mm-hmm.
Only one road there. And the only road from there to Miami is US 41. Dude, there's no other way to get there. So all these tens of thousands of pounds are going out during the day. And nobody was suspect of this little town of less than 5 people that 40 tons of shit a day is moving off this island.
That's where all of the pot, virtually 95% of the pot in America at this time, is coming through this town of 500 people on an island.
Yeah, pretty much.
Incredible.
And we never owned it. We were what the government called service providers. Mm-hmm. That's why we were getting paid the money that we were getting paid, and we charged them $175 a pound to move as much shit as you want. We'll get it from wherever and put it on your doorstep is what we were doing in this scenario, and driving it to Miami. And we'd have 25, 30 drivers driving all day long, making many trips to a plaza that's designated in Miami, Eastern or Western Miami, somewhere on Coral Gables or Kendall, or places like that off of Crum Avenue and Kendall Avenue.
Was the 175, was that price established from the early generation, like before you guys?
Yeah.
And so that was just passed down.
That price was maintained all through the 80s.
Gotcha. And they were like, this is what the Colombians will give you.
If you want your shit done by us, this is what you pay. You want me to do the whole thing from A to Z, go get it and pay for it and put it on your doorstep, that's $175.
Now you were, they were working for or hauling for Cuban traffickers. Did you know of any other groups?
No.
Wow. This is fascinating because Cubans are obviously infamously associated with moving cocaine for the Colombians. Right. You were hauling enormous otherworldly levels of pot that were owned by the Cubans coming from the Colombians. That's really interesting.
The reason for that is because the Cubans and the Colombians weren't very well worked. They never worked well together. They never trusted one another, ever. So they always put a gringo in the middle, and the gringo just happened to be one of the Daniels brothers or whoever, and me, ultimately. And the reason that happened was during this driving it to Miami scenario, which takes place during the day, like I said. I mean, these houses are getting unloaded, and these drivers make as many trips to this plaza as they can throughout the day until the day's ending.
And what's a plaza?
A strip mall or a little, with a bunch of little stores and stuff like that, where we would have one guy from our side and one guy from their side standing and going, that's our truck, that's our car, that's our van, like this. Our driver would get out and go window shop. They would put a driver in it and take it and empty it and bring it back. So we developed what the government now calls a dead drop. That scenario by which you just walk away from it and dead drop it and it's taken care of. Our driver would then see the vehicle come back, get in it, and go make another load if there was time. And this is how it was done. But during this 28-night stretch I told you about, some guys and gals would think, they said it was more nights than that, than we worked in a row, 28 nights. I left it at 28 nights. And answering to your earlier question, with regards to some of the amounts that were taking place here that I'm speaking of, that 28 nights, I did a rough calculation to the tune of 1.6 million pounds.
So what's the math on that? 1.6 million times 175?
Yeah.
It's coming right here. Did you own this, or were you just a worker at this time?
No, I was just now comes the order of secession.
Hang on, how much is it, Brian? $280 million just to you guys
in 28 days.
Just to middleman, just to simply be the logistics.
Just to the crew and the boss that set it up. That paid for everything.
And so the boss is essentially the glorified crab boat owner, if you will.
No. Nobody knows. When I was a kid, I didn't know who the boss was. Nobody gave a who the boss was.
When you say boss, hold on. Who are you talking about?
The guy who organized the potholes that we were going offshore to do. We were going offshore to unload this vessel and bring it in and store it and move it the next day. It was done by one of the brothers.
Yeah, one of the brothers. Okay.
Yep, in Miami with a Cuban counterpart that ordered this stuff and paid to have it. They give you a deposit. My deposit $60,000. You don't get that back.
Who will give you a deposit?
The people that I'm going to go buy for.
Gotcha. So the Cubans.
I secure boats, I secure guys for certain nights, and that money's if your job doesn't go, you don't get it back.
Right. This is what the boss does.
This is what the boss does.
Got it.
So there were only a few of those, and as a kid, we didn't care who the guys was running the shit. All I cared a shit about was getting that paper bag full of cash slid across the kitchen table.
Of course. So working 28 nights, hauling 1.6 million pounds. Just as a worker, how much did you make?
Dude, I couldn't even tell you, man. I was getting paid for jobs that I don't remember having done, because here's another misconception. We bring this, say I bring you 40 tons of shit and I put it on your doorstep. I don't get paid right away. I need to get paid. I get paid when that load starts to sell in Miami.
Right.
Then when they've accumulated enough pay, I start getting paid. But in lieu of that payment, I gave you everything of your load except $40 million or $20 million worth of it. If you owed me $20 million, I'm keeping $20 million worth of your shit.
Right. You would
if
hold
you
off
lose
half.
it,
right.
I'm calling one call and this shit sold, we're getting paid.
Right.
Because we didn't risk our ass to go all the way to Colombia or Jamaica or Central America, where the f we went, to get your shit to not get paid.
To get ripped off.
So knowing that's why cocaine was out of the deal. I'm not holding anybody's coke, dude. I'm not going down that road. But that's just how it worked. And a lot of times it would take 2-3 weeks before I get paid for a job. So in that 2-3 weeks, I probably worked half a dozen or so different jobs.
Right.
And now I'm getting paid for shit I don't remember having done.
Right.
That's just how it was.
You're just getting trash. You're just getting sandwich bags with money.
Bags with different 50,000, 100,000. Because I was getting, ultimately after that rookie 2 days, I was getting paid according to the size of the load. Now I'm averaging anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000 a week, and I was just turning 21. I'm going on 22.
And as a just as an unloader.
As a guy going offshore and offloading. Now, that's where we talk about the hierarchy of the whole scheme of things. The boat that goes to Colombia and back, those guys are paid well.
Yeah.
Right around $1 million to make that.
A head?
No.
Just for the ship?
Collectively. Captain, then he divides among however many crews on that boat.
Now, but those weren't Americans, though, or were they?
They were from wherever we could get them from.
So you guys actually organized going down there too?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Yeah. I thought that was organized by the Colombians.
No, dude, I would go down there myself. Wow. When I took over, I had inherited this connection that we spoke about, and I had to go down there and actually pick out the shit that I wanted loaded.
Oh my God. So end to end.
And I could send a boat controlled it. After I picked out what I wanted, 40 tons or whatever I went there to get, 100 tons or 150 tons or whatever it was I could get at any one time. I would spend a day or 2 days down there picking it out, testing it with the boss's pipe and saying, how many of those you got? Kick them down. I'd spray a mark on them, which I'll get to that if we get to it. Very reason why they get marked. And when the crew behind us is taking them, weighing the bales as I get them. And when I get to where I went down there for, we go back and party at the house, and I fly off the next day in a private jet that was owned by Carlito, Leo, and myself.
That's right. Yeah. You were flying on privates at this point, dude.
Yeah, we had a business. We bought a used corporate Lear.
Did you feel like, I'm a kingpin now, like I'm a boss?
Never. None of that ever crossed my mind. I never thought it in that context.
You guys were so blue collar, even though you had millions as a worker before you even became a boss.
That 30,000 pound load that I did as a first, I never saw a load that small after that. Wow. That was just a trial run kind of a thing. Yeah. Those where I was most common, I would say, rather, is 20 tons. We did 55 tons one night during that 28 night run. We did 55 tons one night just to see if we could do it, man. Wow. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about just getting the work done, you know, and could we do it?
Yeah.
You know, it was ridiculous.
Was it still a rush for you, or in those moments?
No, it was just,
it was work.
All we knew, my friends and I, that is, as kids growing up in that industry, all we knew was 20, 30 ton loads. This was we didn't know any different. So there was no comparison, no way to comparison, no way to sit back and go, God damn it, man, 30 tons? No, it wasn't like that.
So how many years were you a worker before you inherited the connection and became the boss?
From 1979 to late 1984.
Okay, so for about 5 years.
5 years.
But you're already a millionaire. You've taken
in a
millions.
sense, yeah. But you know what? Making that kind of money as a kid, and the older generations were very aware and cognizant and made you aware of how important it was to be able to spend money and not have anything to show for it. because kids with that amount of money can get very irresponsible.
Were you fucking the money off? I know you.
Oh yeah, we would. They give us the premise on how to go about spending money and not on certain things and ways of spending it and not having anything to show for it. And then we got creative on our own after a while. And one instance in particular, I don't want to stray too far off the subject here, but because we keep getting into different things, and now we're into the fun facts.
Don't worry, we're this is all in there.
You want to keep me on track
from in this?
Okay,
just be your sweet self.
I came up with two different scenarios, and one would be for me and four of my buddies. First time we ever went, hey, let's do this. I took $200,000 in $100 bills, and each of my buddies took $200,000. We had $1 million between the five of us. We spent 4 days in Miami and made our way to South Beach, hitting club after club and taking on the tab.
You mean for the whole club?
For the whole club, for the whole night. And with the sole intention of coming home with just
having
enough money for gas.
Women. Oh, okay.
Did you get rid of the money?
Wow. Just because it's like, I have nowhere to store this.
$300,000 is a weekend in Miami in bar money. That's
just how blow?
It was. No. Oh, well, it was given to, we never bought it.
You should have just bought
that's
it.
how I wound up with a house in the Bahamas. I should tell you about that one. It was,
We're going to tell these fun stories on the Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/theknect show, we're going to do a follow-up after this, but I want to get this all in because this is like, so you're 26 now.
Yeah.
Tell us how you became the boss, how you moved up from being a boat worker, an offshore hauler.
This is good. You're really very good at what you do, man.
Thank man. I try.
And I've been a huge fan since I picked you up and then you found me. But it was just as a matter of circumstance. Happened to be that 55-ton night we did. Now, that was the last of the 3 nights I had worked. So I'm off for the next 2-3 nights because we're just burned out,
exhausted.
So we got 55 tons or better. At one point on the island, every house that had a dock in front of it around the island had pot in it. So we do this 55 tons, but during my hiatus before these last 3 runs, I was pulled aside by Daryl, one of the Daniels brothers, and my buddy.
Tell us who the Daniels brothers are.
The Daniels brothers were the 5 brothers who were the original second generation pot haulers. They were the ones that taught their kids, and the kids were the kids that I grew up with. They were the second generation. First generation was begun by a guy named Loren Toch Brown. He was a legend in the Everglades, not notoriously much for his pot hauling, which he renounced, in his later years after some trouble with the law and
that's always
IRS,
which
of course, but a sweetheart of a man. He figured out the path. He went to Panama and around the corner and up to the rivers in Colombia to find the lowland weed that everybody was craving and figured out the method.
Yeah.
And it was trial and error, dude. It was no easy task.
About what years did that
These
start?
were in the 60s.
Okay, got it.
And
so now you're technically a 3rd generation hauler.
So then come the Daniels brothers move into Everglades and when they're younger. And the youngest of the brothers, Craig, befriends Toch. And Toch brings him into the pot hauling world. And he takes a suitcase full of money to his brothers one night and opens it up and says, look, guys, come on, let's go. And the brothers almost threw him out of the house and shunned him. They're like, because their thinking in those days was if you worked for these Cuban guys, they just didn't kill you than pay you. Well, nothing could have been further from the truth. And Craig was trying to tell them, dude, it's not like that. At least if nothing else, take some money and buy your kids some bicycles or something,
Buy some teeth, you rednecks.
Story goes further on. One by one, they start to relent and they come on board and they begin to learn the industry from Toch and their connections and that. They become the second generation, the 5 Daniels brothers. Dwayne, Randall, Cheryl, Craig, and 5th one just eludes me. Sorry, but anyways, read about it.
And they took it from like
the youngest of the brothers.
They took it from this nascent industry to this like booming.
They took it up
trade.
a notch from what Toch did, and they organized it a little bit better. And they made the because there was 5 of them, they made 5 connections ultimately, and then their connections in Miami. So that's what kept us all busy and all working with the 5 Daniels brothers. And there's a very interesting article if you Google Daniels Brothers of Everglades. A Miami Herald article will come up that reads, the cocaine cowboys of Miami have nothing on the Daniels brothers of Everglades City in terms of volume, not in terms of their violent nature,
Right,
because
of course
we were
not.
family and generational. And not only one time in my 10 years of doing this did I ever see a gun.
Yeah. You guys,
Only
nobody
one.
ever carried guns.
We were
there was never
family
any
and
violence.
generational, and so were the countries
Yeah.
we were going to. They
Right.
were, you know, descendants of
Yeah.
the people we were working with. Those are
Yeah.
the connections that I ultimately inherited.
Yeah, this predated the cartels. This was
Yes.
really like it was a family business.
Exactly.
It was
and
smuggling.
business is exactly a great way to describe it.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't smuggling or, you know, drug, you know, smuggling or whatever that. We didn't view it in that context.
It was exactly
It was,
that.
but we didn't view it in that way. And
Yeah.
you know, fortunately for us, because when you start thinking and going down that road in terms of thinking that way, you're going to fuck up.
Yeah.
You know, but we, back to what we were talking about, that 55-ton night, 3 days prior to that, I was given a chainsaw and a wrecking bar, and so was my buddy Jimmy by Daryl, one of the 5 brothers.
Yeah.
The oldest, really, I think, or Randall was the oldest, but Daryl, this was his 55 tons was his job, and the 3 coming, you know, before it. He gave me a wrecking bar and a chainsaw to Jimmy and I, and went to a brand new Winnebago, had 125 miles on it. And that's only half of them were the miles getting it from Fort Myers to the island. So he said, I want you to go in there and strip everything out of that thing from the windows down. I mean, gut that. And we even took the captain's chairs, the drivers, and the seats out of it. And so when you looked at the Winnebago, you saw the curtains and the cabinets and all that shit. But if you got up there and you looked in like this, it was nothing from window to window. But after we stripped it out, they put airbags in the springs and the suspensions. So when they put 11,500 pounds of bales in this thing, and now when you look in it, it's bales from the one window to the next like this, right? And they loaded that thing when we did that 55-ton night. You know, after Jimmy and I stripped it, they got it prepared and ready to go. So we're going to take a massive load, you know, one shot, try to do a couple like that. So we do the 55 tons. I'm off the next day, and I walk over to this house to see, what's going on, because it's my day off, and how's the, shit like that. And then Daryl sees me. He goes, "Hey, Timmy, come here." I'm like, "Oh," because I kind of think I know what's going on here. And he said, "Timmy," I said, "I need you to do me a favor, if you would, please. I'd like you to drive that Winnebago to Miami for me." He says, "Because I need somebody I can trust to do this." And the reason he needed this trust factor was simply because you couldn't go to the dead drop spot where all the trucks and the vans and the shit are going in the plaza, because you get 30 feet of this thing, you can smell it, right?
Yeah.
It had to be driven directly to the stash house.
Yeah.
The place where nobody has ever been.
Wow. No workers ever actually met the buyer.
Our buffer between the crew was at that dead drop.
That's right.
Nobody out of our crew who ever met or knew anybody on the other side. A barrier was up.
That's the buyer.
Only 5 people knew those people over there, and those were the brothers.
Those are the brothers. Yeah.
Guys that were putting us to work.
Mm-hmm.
We don't care who these people are, but the circumstances being what they were, this couldn't go there, but it needed to go to the house.
Yeah.
So he said, "Timmy, would you drive this thing for me?" And I went, "Well," because of who it was, I relented. Yeah, I'll drive it. He said, "Well, I'll give you $35,000 for the trip. 2-hour drive. I mean, $35,000. I made $75,000 that night before on that one load.
Just hauling. Yeah.
I made a total of like $225,000 in the last 3 nights. I didn't need to do this, but it was because of who was asking me. I did it.
Right. You guys looked up to them. They're very,
I mean, Daryl's asking me to do shit. Well, yeah, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
So I get in this thing, and what we had done was, because we took the seats out of it, we had stacked this shit in there to where we pulled one bale out where you could sit down in there and drive this thing like this, right?
Surrounded by bales.
Surrounded by bales all the way to the back of the thing.
Yeah.
And this behemoth was like, I mean, it was, it was smoke and trying, once I got it going, so this is a pig. So I make this 120-mile, 2-hour trip. And I get on Chrome Avenue, and I'm driving, and I'm being instructed over a 2-meter radio. And this is important to backstep on too, was not only did we have our chase boat safety valve offshore, we had one onshore for the drivers as well.
Okay. Yes. Tell us.
In terms of what we called spotters, spotter drivers. And at any one time during one of these scenarios, by way of emptying house after house and run after run during the day, there would be anywhere from 12 to 15 spotter drivers who were paid $5,000 a day to just drive to that plaza and back. And they're all staggered in different formation all along the route there and back.
And what was a spotter supposed to do if he saw a cop, a highway patrolman?
Well, we had by that point already had somebody sitting on every highway patrol and every sheriff and every Marine patrol and every park ranger or
you guys had
wildlife
counter
officer.
surveillance.
We had guys watching them.
You had counter surveillance on everybody in the area.
Well, there weren't that many law enforcement in that area. Dude, we're talking about Everglades and Big Cypress National Preserve. There's nothing out there. So there's not much patrolling needing to be done. So when there is, and where these people are, park a guy down the street outside their house, man.
Yeah.
You know, hey,
so he could say, Timmy, on, this part of the
this
highway,
guy's moving, dude.
just make sure you go in the speed limit.
Right. Or we know where this guy's at, be cool, be careful. Cause you can't turn around. You can't stop. There's nowhere to pull off to.
No.
You just got to pass the fucking guy.
Yeah.
Should you get stopped, and this is the scenario where where their escape comes in.
Right.
What the drivers have always been instructed to do is go ahead and get stopped, but wait for whoever stops you to get between your vehicle and theirs. Throw yours in reverse and just haul ass and nail the out of it, because now you're a ton heavier than you normally would be.
Right.
Or thereabouts. You're gonna crash the out of him. He ain't going nowhere because his radiator, his fan bell, all his shit is trashed. He can't catch you, but he can't outrun his radio. So all you need to do is get out of sight of him, stop the car, truck, van, or whatever it is right in the middle of the road, and there will already be, because you've told the spotters,
right,
dude, it's up. And
a chase car will pick you up.
One of these guys will pick you up, you get in the car and go home.
And you're just hoping those cops don't start shooting at you.
Let them have it.
Because in this day and age, you run into a cop car, they're going to charge you with attempt murder.
At that time, in that day, there was no shooting at you, man. I mean, it was a guy with a traffic stop for all he knew. Yeah. And the guy was pissed. And you're not going to shoot you. He's going to radio to the Miami end of it. And by the time that happens, it's 45 minutes gone by until another fucking, because you're on the little bum,
Yeah.
But you're already home by that time. And because the drivers are never the ones that own it, and the drivers are never ones that fill it.
Yeah.
The owner, once it's stopped, and they know everybody, and here's this 2-meter radio. We've got hundreds of these. Everybody that's working has a radio.
Right.
Communication is absolutely key.
Yeah.
The owner of the vehicle knows it's been stopped. What's he do? Calls the sheriff's department, says, I just looked out my driveway. My truck's gone. My truck's been stolen.
The damnedest thing. I'm missing a Winnebago.
My van's been stolen.
Wow.
You report it stolen, so it's
it
relieved
doesn't
of
trace
any
back to you.
responsibility of what that's been involved in. He'll get it back.
Wow.
The boats are the same way. Billy didn't own the boat. His daddy did. So we get
literally everybody is getting paid. The people who lend the boats out, the people who lend the cars out. You didn't even have to haul pot, and you could make a living.
Yeah. So let's drop back for a second. So I'm getting paid according to the size of the load. Say we're doing 25 tons collectively between two boats. We do 50 tons like that. I make $75,000 to $100,000 for that one night. That, in the overall scheme of things, is it's the highest paid shore position, next to the guy that owns the house that we're putting that whole load into, because he's making a significant contribution. We're getting paid the amounts we are because we are in sole control. 3 people are in sole control of an entire load of pot for 5-6 hours, and we're out there on our own for 5 and 6 hours with this entire load. So we're getting our asses paid. Yeah, because the 2 of us have just humped 800 bales weighing 70 pounds or 80 pounds a piece and busted our asses to get it on shore. Now the guys that are coming out from the islands with the smaller boats, those are about $30,000 a piece.
Gotcha. So you're making 75, they're making 30.
They're making 30,000 each a night.
Yeah.
And out of that 30,000, they have to pay their guy on board. There's a guy driving the boat and another guy on board, their mate. When they pull up to us, and they're like flies on a garbage can, man. They're pulling up. Their guy jumps on board and on our pile, starts throwing on his boat, and everybody's throwing on their boat, and I'm throwing on whoever's closest, like this. And then they start taking off 30, 40 bales. They make the run to the house. Bale handlers that are making $5,000 a night are offloading at the dock and running it up and throwing it into the house, and they're stacking it. The guys in the house are stacking it. All these guys are making $5,000 a piece.
Yeah.
The guys on the boat, working with the boat, $30,000, they're making $10,000. Captain's making 15. So from there, it's the drivers.
Yeah.
Each car, depending if it's a van, truck, or car like that, can make $30,000. They pay
to drive to Miami.
To drive to Miami once.
And just make that dead drop.
A lot of times they're doing 2 dead drops a day. So they're making $60,000 a day. But out of that, they pay the driver.
Right.
So the driver's making on that end of it, driver's making $15,000 a run.
Yep.
He gets half of it.
Just to pick you up after you make the dead drop and bring you back to Miami, or bring you back to Everglades City.
Just to pick the shit up from where the owner dropped it in his front yard, drive it to Miami, dead drop it, bring an empty vehicle back. There's $15,000.
Oh,
That's
so they bring the same vehicle back as the load? How does that happen though?
They
if
drop
it's a dead
it in
drop?
the parking lot.
Yeah.
They get out of it and go window shop.
And they go, wait.
Another Cuban gets in it.
Makes sense.
Because our guy's going, that's ours, that's ours, that's ours. And this Cuban's telling his guys,
Eso.
Yeah. They go take and empty it and bring it back empty. He gets the same vehicle and goes and loads it again.
Gotcha. And he's making 2 runs a day.
He can make 2 runs a day.
$30,000.
He makes $30,000. The owner makes $30,000.
And what is a spotter?
The spotters are making $5,000 a day.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And all they have to do is drive to that plaza and back all day long. They're 2 hours each way.
So there's this $100 million economy in this tiny little bum speck of nothing.
Right.
No offense, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And now what does that community do now? Is it much poorer? Have you been back?
Oh, yeah. I go back all the time. I've still, some of my old buddies are, they're airboat tours, doing airboat tours with swan buggy tours and shit.
Did that pot money, did that hauling money from the 70s and 80s, do you think it persisted? Like, did it help build the community up like the way cocaine built, the Miami skyline?
No, not in that way. That's
because surely they could have purchased assets, things that would help them like in the legitimate world. Like, how do you buy a ship? Like buying a ship, there's got to be some equity in that. Like I assume the Daniels brothers bought, large pieces of equipment that
hired it.
Oh, they always hired it. They always hired a ship out.
The boats that were sent to Colombia typically were handpicked.
And so that's $1 million.
That's $1 million.
But they also got to wait for the pot loads, right?
Well, yeah, they're going to get loaded. However, and
they got to wait for it to sell, right?
Because we're in control of both ends of it. We can tell them how long to expect it to get loaded.
Right.
And in a lot of cases, it's only a couple of days.
Right. Before it sells.
And then, it gets loaded in Colombia.
Right.
And then they make that voyage back to us.
Right.
But what we're talking about is the brothers or whoever's coordinating these individual jobs are approaching people with other individuals that own boats and saying, look, hey, dude, you want to make $1 million bucks,
But so my question is, that's the longest part of the journey.
But we don't buy the freighters.
No, okay, that makes sense. So that's the longest part of the journey, going down there, the people that own the boats, they're taking a huge, enormous risk.
Oh, yeah, there's no escaping that.
So how are they the first people to get paid when the load sells?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And then on down the chain. Okay, great.
But a lot of times they're giving them some money up front.
Okay.
That's where the pay money up front comes, to hold and secure them. So they're going to get, a significant amount of cash if the job doesn't even work.
But it's only $60,000 as the deposit though. So how does
yeah, but if you got a ship with a crew of 4 guys on it and you hand them, $40,000 of that, that's, I'll take $10,000 for maybe and maybe not doing the job, but I still keep the 10 if I do it. Plus I get paid again.
Right.
Okay,
great. So this all makes sense. So now cut to you've got a Winnebago stuff with 11,000 pounds.
Yeah.
You make it to Miami.
I'm on the radio. They're telling me where to turn and when to turn.
Yeah.
And they're taking me down Chrome Avenue, almost to Homestead. And they take me off into this orange grove, this orange orchard out in the middle of bumfuck nowhere land. And all of a sudden it opens up into this godly, awful, medieval castle looking house that some cocaine cowboy just had some more money than he had brains, and he built this gaudy looking Viking thing.
Yeah, money doesn't have by taste.
I just pulled the Winnebago in there and pulled up next to the house, and once I got out, they started immediately, opened up some doors that led onto the house and started unloading this vehicle. But I was told to stay there all day until the loads stopped coming, because I was to drive a car with money in it back to Daryl.
Right.
That's why he needed this trust factor, and that's how I stayed all day, and I met people that nobody ever met except Daryl and his brothers. So when they went to prison in 1984 or 1983 and 1984, the government did 2 operations. And this is significant at this point in the story, how I made that jump. As those 2 federal operations involved, 1983 involved over 250 federal agents from every branch of law enforcement under the United States government descended on that little town of 500 people and started picking off people. Well, Operation Everglades 1 in 1983 was a total flop because everybody knew 2 weeks before they showed up that they were coming because they had senators, they had judges, they had congressmen. Those generations had people paid.
So the Daniels brothers were paying.
They had people
politicians,
paid. Yes. Oh yeah.
Judges, cops. Wow.
So they knew this operation was coming. So everybody did. So it was a failure, but they decided to come almost a year later. Here they come, 1984. And this time the adults said, they're not going to stop. And these people that they were paying said, they're not going to stop this. So, just relent. So they just sat there at 2 a.m, smoked cigarettes on the front porch, watched the show. Yeah. And here they come. 250 plus agents descended on that town. But in 1984, the second time around, there were more reporters, agencies on that island than there were people to be arrested.
Right.
And Time magazine was one of them.
Wow.
And we'll put up some pictures out of that Time magazine.
So this is when the Daniels brothers ultimately take a fall.
They take their fall, and they get indicted. And then comes the story in the Miami Herald about cocaine cowboys and have nothing on the Daniels brothers. Like the cocaine cowboys got nothing.
So now Florida's on the map. So you guys are a target.
The judge is reading off their list of seizures, which include a Netherlands Antilles holding company that was worth millions, and it had properties around the Caribbean. And here in the States, they had houses, timeshares, hotels, motels, cars, trucks, airplanes. Daryl had single engine Cessna that he never had a license to fly. He just had the money to buy one and paid a guy to help him learn how to fly the fucking thing. Yeah. But they went that second operation. They got the more visible personalities, but they didn't have any clue at that time to the significance of what it was that was taking place. They had no clue that, half the town was involved and the majority of the work was being done by the younger generation because Time magazine reads, within the body of the article, tells a story about a small Southwest Florida town that was tarred by drug smuggling, and most of it's, they said 600 residents. Most of its 600 residents said, so what?
Yeah.
But at the same time, that also read that the town was left of mostly women and children and younger adults because the entire male population's gone to prison. And that's when, by day at that house, and everybody gone to prison, the work stopped.
That's right.
They knew Timmy, and they knew this good-looking mug here.
Yeah.
Took them a month to find me, but they found me.
So the Cubans are still working.
They want to work.
The Cubans didn't get popped, right?
No.
So you had met the buyer. See, that's key right there. You got the connect.
The guys came and looking for me because they knew me. They didn't know anybody else.
Yeah.
Because nobody else met them.
Right.
So they come looking. They found me. Knock on my door one day, and there's this guy George from the house. Timmy, he goes. Dude, we got work to do. He says, can you do this? And I just didn't even get any thought of, yeah.
Right.
So
now you're the man.
I went back and so now here I am. I just put my foot in the door.
There we go.
I'm unbeknownst to me one day, it's just all of a sudden there's a knock on my door. And here I am putting my foot in the door to this position that I didn't aspire to. And to this day, consider it just a matter of freak circumstance that I even got that way.
I mean, that's the story of drug trafficking, though. It's the right historical, sociological, political, geographic circumstances that allow, drug smugglers to become what they become.
It was just one particular sequence of events after another that led me to become an outlaw. Not a criminal, because none of us describe ourselves as criminal. We're outlaw. We're outside the law that you see fit to put in place that we don't necessarily agree with.
Right.
So let's put our distinction in those terms.
Yeah.
But moving on, I didn't know. I knew everything from going down to Colombia and offshore and onshore and getting into Miami and all that. But I didn't know what happens prior to that.
So we're gonna. I want you to tell your story, the second half, when you're the boss to prison. I want to tell that on the Patreon. So you go to patreon.com/theconnectshow. That's where you hear that.
Okay.
But before we wrap, I just kind of want to talk about a little bit more about the logistics, the money that the Cubans had to get down to Colombia after the load sold, because Colombia was the connect. Did you guys take that money down there for them?
Yeah.
And then you would load.
Yes.
Gotcha. So every time you went down there, you'd also be carrying them the money, bringing them the money.
I'd fly the money right with me.
How much money would you guys bring down there?
Not much. Depending on, like
what
I
do you
said,
mean not much?
Well, in the overall scheme of things, not much at all. Because I could buy 30,000 pounds of weed
for $3 million
for $300,000.
Wait, how's that? Is that math check out?
$10 a pound. $300,000 is $30,000.
Oh yeah,
pounds.
Yeah,
Dude. That's
yeah. 30,000 for 300 grand.
So
Which
if I took $1 million down there, I
suitcase.
could buy 900,000 pounds of weed for $1 million, and that's not much. $1 million in the overall scheme of things.
Not in the way you guys are.
Not
moving,
by the time I get it back here. When I'm 30,000 pounds, cost you for 300,000, and I turned it into 15 million in 8 days. Minus my fee for a job that's 30,000 pounds is 5 million.
Yeah,
you just made $10 million off of a $300,000 investment in 8 days. You think these are shooting at me?
No, of
they
course
can't
not.
give me money fast enough to go fucking back.
And that's when you start weighing the money, and there's no time to count.
As a matter of course, what happens is it all becomes mathematics at that point. If I just made you $10 million in 8 days, you take that 9,700,000. That's minus the 300,000 initial investment.
Yeah.
Divide 300,000 into 9,700,000, and you come up with a number 32. 32. What that 32 represents is the number of chances I have to get your next load in before you lose money. I can lose the first 31, and all I have to do is get that last 30-second load in. You still made money. You haven't lost money.
It's an unbeatable business.
That's
you can
why
lose almost all of your product and still make money.
Exactly. And that shoots in the head anybody's preconceived notions about violence at that level of business. There is none for surely that reason.
Well, tell us about cocaine, though, because in that time in South Florida, there was a lot of violence,
it was a
obviously.
wash of cocaine.
So how many coke loads were you guys involved in, you personally?
Not one.
You weren't involved in any coke drops?
Not one.
How many people were involved in Everglades City in coke runs?
There were several. I would have to say maybe 2 that I knew of.
Gotcha.
And what would happen would be that those coke loads would come with a load of weed at the same time.
Oh, okay.
So we'd be out there to get what we needed to, and there'd be maybe 1 or 2 other chase boats that weren't supposed to be with us circling that boat waiting for us, and then they would throw stuff down to those other boats because the amount of money made on coke and the volume of material is such that it's, you can make $20 million off of a boatload of coke, a small boatload of coke, and it would take a giant 3 boatloads of
it would take a huge ship, a huge commercial
volume
ship.
versus money and profit is,
especially back then. I think in the late 70s, early 80s, a kilo was like 50 grand.
Yeah.
That was like a resale.
It was insane.
It's insane.
And there was so much of it at that time through cocaine cowboys, as they were dubbed, coming into Miami, and Miami was awash in cocaine. Man.
Now, do you think that the majority of that coke came through Everglades City, or was that just a piece of it? That was just a piece of it.
That was just an occasional now and then. These guys are doing maybe some shit on their own, type of thing. Right. It never involved any major cartel deals or anything that maybe like Mickey Monday and those guys and the Cocaine Cowboys were doing, or George Young was doing, flying with Carlos Slater, and those, doing those things. Right. That created an atmosphere of such incredible violence that Miami was dubbed the most dangerous place on the planet to be, barring any other war or conflict taking place.
Right.
And it was dubbed Paradise Lost by Time Magazine by that sheer reason.
Right.
And that was a huge factor in why I and any of us wanted to get involved in coke, because of the way we operated. There's no way if you owe me $25-30 million for doing your coke job, am I keeping $30 million of your coke in lieu of payment, dude? That's not here. It would be, trust to be paid kind of a thing.
So
it wasn't the government, and the people you're dealing with is totally different. You're dealing with a murderous onslaught of Cubans and Colombians in Miami in the cocaine industry. Everybody wanting to be the guy. Everybody wanted to be that guy, but there was only one guy, and it wasn't a guy, it was a girl. It was a woman. Her name was Griselda Blanco. She was the godmother of cocaine. She was the one that actually gave the roots, her proven roots of cocaine trafficking from Medellin to the United States, and gave them to Carlos and Pablo Escobar.
Right.
Gave them their start. She was the one that did that.
So was the reason you guys didn't want to get involved in it? It sounds like it's because it's too violent. It wasn't necessarily the law. It was the violence.
Exactly, because we could do what we were doing. And like I said, only once ever in 10 years did I see a gun hauling pot.
And it was the cops, right?
That was the time I went to Columbia, and when the boss said, "Come on, let's go see your shit," the first time I went to Columbia, he ran out to his Bronco and grabbed an AK out the door, and his partner grabbed one, and my partner interpreter grabbed one, so I just grabbed one and got in the truck, and off we went. Left mine in the truck, never used it, but that's the only time I ever handled a weapon during that, and during that time was, to go leave the house.
It's so crazy. Like, we had Roger Reeves on here a couple months ago. He was one of Pablo's Coke pilots, but he started off just as a many Southern boys. There's something about the Southern boys because you guys are so good with labor, so mechanical. Blue collar people have skilled labor usually become drug runners. They're the ones who become drug runners because they have the skills.
Right.
You guys had
two things.
You had the labor
skill
force
and trust. Yes. There's a huge Southern boy mentality, trust factor involved in that.
Right.
Old boy, homeboy.
It's old boy shit. Yeah.
That's right.
But the guys who were flying in pot, who preceded the Coke industry, right? The guys that were flying it in on DC-3s, right?
DC-3s and 10s. DC-10s, you can get up 12,000 pounds on a DC-10.
Nothing. It's nothing compared
not in
to
terms of what you can put on a boat.
The ships were doing.
Right.
Now, what do you think it was that killed that era? Was it the law enforcement, or was it the fact that you guys couldn't compete with the Mexican and then ultimately the American Bud? Like, what do you think ended the era of hauling from Colombia?
It's interesting you should say that because I had been contacted and offered a chance to meet and have a sit down with the supervisor for Homeland Security of in South Florida. He called me one day about 6 years ago and invited me to his office to have a chat. He wanted to meet a legend, he said. I started laughing. Legend. He goes, "Yeah, just come and if you're willing to come to my office, come and have a chat with me." So I pull up to this building with no numbers, no name, no nothing on it. Wrought iron fence around it with steel-tipped wrought iron on it, and a gate that I went through. And the minute I stopped that car in a parking lot, a Marine came out of the door with an M16 and walked out to meet me in the parking lot and escorted me to the door. Into 3 doors inside the building to meet with Homeland Security. And what he told me was the simple truth. And we were laying out on the line to one another. He told me shit I didn't know, and I told him shit that he absolutely didn't know. But one thing for sure was, he said, when they stopped us on Operation Peacemaker, and that was me when I took over, and running 5 crews, Everglades, Goodland, Marco Island, Naples, and Pine Island.
You were running 5 crews at your height.
There were 60, 70 people on each crew.
What were you making a year in your run from 85 to 88 when you got locked up?
Millions.
What were you making a month?
Millions.
What were you making a haul?
A haul?
That's how we'll break it down.
1.5 to 2.5 million of each.
And how many hauls were you doing a month?
Probably 2 a week, 3, something like that.
So you were flying to Colombia, twice a month.
Well, in the beginning it was that way, but then as it got to be what it became, I wouldn't just go down for 50 tons. I'd go down for 100 tons.
So that you were moving 100 tons,
150 tons I'd buy at a time, and then I would send the boats incrementally to go get it.
So you took what the Daniels brothers did and blew it up.
Oh, dude, the next generation did, man.
Wow.
We took it to a level to where we weren't using what were called mullet skiffs. The bait. These are guys on the net boats that catch the bait for the crabbing industry, and the fishing industry, and the shallower water drafting boats.
Right.
These were used to haul in the earlier days because they could go through those shallow drafting.
Right.
Then when we got it, we did the advent of what's called a T-craft. Now you have a picture of one of these older boats that I gave you. We'll show you these. We'll show you this. And this is the type of boat that takes it from us through the shallows. But we also had brothers in the Naples that were boat builders that were building boats designed specifically under our direction to do what we needed them to do.
Dude, think about boat builders. So how much money they made in the 70s and 80s in Florida.
Dude, T-Craft and Morgan were the preferred boat. And if you're talking 5 crews, you're talking 70 people at least on each crew. You're talking about 25 to 30 boats, 40 of those type of boats on each crew. You're hiding these boats. They're not just parked in your backyard everywhere. There's too many. It's just, that's a sore thumb sticking out waiting to be, stepped on.
Yeah.
So a lot of these boats are hidden. But a lot of the boats that were in Everglades, the guys would use them for fishing and, in backwater and guiding, because that's the type of boat you need. So there was nothing out of the ordinary for that. But,
by the way, so now you have hundreds of people working for you. Hundreds.
They don't know it's me.
Right. But do you think the size and the scale of that operation is ultimately what, allowed the law to penetrate you guys?
No. It had everything to do with one of the guys that was a long-lived family from Everglades, well-known family in Everglades, was around in Colombia doing a cocaine thing on his own. Like I said, a lot of guys did that shit.
Yeah.
Got himself stupidly up and thrown in prison in Colombia. Well, government finds out who he is and where he's from and why he's there, and said, look, they went down there and said, look, here's what we can do for you.
Yeah, you want to get out of this?
Yeah, here's what we need you to do for us.
Wow.
So they put him right back. And when the guys aren't working, and doing what we need them to do or whatever, I don't give a what you do, man. It's none of my goddamn business. Yeah. But when you're given that down payment for the working a certain night, your ass shows up.
Yeah.
But he was down there doing his shit and gone and back. Nobody knew it. Nobody had a clue.
Yeah.
So they put him right back to work.
They spit him right back out.
He was my chase boat operator.
Wow. So how long the
they let 2 jobs go before they pounced.
Gotcha. Now this is brilliant, and I know I'm glossing over a lot of the details because I want people to go read your book.
There's so much.
I want people to go read your book, but okay, we don't deal with a lot of turncoats and snitches on this show. Mm-hmm. How you guys protected yourselves from and mitigated your sentences?
Right.
You did what Mexican kingpins do. They tell on each other,
right?
And they willingly do it. And they tell their kids, hey, if you get caught, just give them my name.
Right.
Give them my name. What cooperate so you can mitigate your sentence.
Right. Well,
tell us about that.
What precipitated beyond that, or even an addendum to that, was a simple fact that there was just so many of us. I mean, Jesus, oh my God Almighty. And like I said, at that time, they were just beginning the mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines across the federal sentencing rules. And now if you get caught with what we were doing, if you get one indictment, there's a mandatory 40 years to life. There's 10 to life on each for the 4 counts that come with the indictment, and $1 million per count. So you're going to get one indictment. It is a mandatory 40 years to life and $4 million in fines. That happened September 1st, 1987. So if any guys were around still and doing work, which a lot of them still were, after those times, they were getting mandatory sentence. I was sentenced under old law, but the judge saw fit to find a statute that still didn't provide for parole and gave me that sentence, because of my managerial role that I played in all of this. But to cut to the quick, because there were so many of us, and the guy that got caught in Colombia precipitated this whole event, this domino effect, picking on the younger guys. I had 20-year-olds and 21-year-olds still running boats in the backwaters, because that's how I learned. And you take one of these little kids and pull them aside and say, look, dude, man, this is over. They've got us. You're going to do 40 years or life, and you got to come up with $4 million. Or you're going to take the rest of your life paying it off, because they're going to garnish it and whatever. So what are you going to do? You're 20, 21 years old. They're telling on your grandma. You're telling on your grandpa, what the. But once they started affecting these arrests, I was part of the first 38 to go. And we'll show you a picture of the day I was arrested for just under 400,000 pounds is what I got indicted for. And they didn't know till after about three weeks into this investigation that was only about a week's work, But getting back to the sentencing, I was given a non-parolable sentence, but I was also given a mandatory 10 years. And I was given the mandatory, I couldn't get sentenced below 10 years. But my $1.2 million attorney out of Baltimore saved my ass and capped my sentence at 20 years. So they couldn't give me more than 20, but they couldn't give me less than 10.
Right.
Whew, I dodged life sentence. But what was taking place was that they were getting kids now. They were old. Those people, I think, working at that time were in their 30s, maybe early 30s,
right?
Because everybody else had all gone and got out of the business by that time,
right?
So what the government understood now that was they're not arresting adults any longer. And one thing in particular, and this is very important for you to understand with regards to the snitch thing, was that.
That's my question.
Yeah.
This is brilliant.
What happened was, and it was done by design rather than accident, because the United States government suddenly figured out that they're kids now. And they weren't quite willing to put kids away for life for what they were giving their fathers and uncles and grandfathers,
which, by the way,
18 months for a year before.
I hate to be this guy. You motherfuckers had some white privilege there, because we talked to a lot of black 20-year-olds that got life sentences for 1 kilo of crack.
I'm going to tell you that. I'm not going to sit here and tell you there's no disparity in the law.
Yeah, I'm not that guy, but yeah, that's some.
There is some fucked up shit going on.
Yeah.
But this is just the plain and simple fact and the truth to our involvement.
Answer my question, please. The snitching.
Right.
You guys all told on each other and willingly said, hey, everybody just cooperate. Everybody's going down anyways.
Right.
Everybody's cooperating on each other. Therefore, we get lesser sentences.
Let me put this to bed for you. Let me put it to bed for everybody.
I got that out in about 15 seconds.
How did everybody, how am I able to sit here after having 16 life sentences handed down to me and $16 million and a very particular sequence of events taking place in order for me to be sitting here having this conversation with you? And as great as it is and as fun as it is to do, I'm allowed to do this for one reason and one simple reason only. And that is because when the government saw they were getting kids and they were closing in on this whole thing, the U.S. attorney that was prosecuting me, Susan Daltuva was her name. She's alive today, and maybe she's listening somewhere out of Washington State, that she looked me dead in the eye and said, Timmy, all we want to do is stop this. We're tired of it. We want to end it. We want to stop it. So when they realized that we're getting all kids now, younger adults and this and that, life sentences weren't comparing to the 18, 14, 12 months they were giving a year prior. So what they did was, we'll give you immunity from prosecution from anything that you've done, but save one count in return until we can do something, punish you in some fashion. But through this immunity idea, allow you to openly tell us about whoever, whatever, and like that without any repercussion.
Right.
They gave that deal to everybody that was being arrested.
Wow.
So when they said, dude, they're talking about you, man, they're going to come for you. And when they do, they're going to give you this deal to cooperate. So tell on Jimmy and Teddy and Willie, because they've got immunity from prosecution.
Right. Doesn't matter anyways.
So you can tell them their name and you're not hurting them.
Right.
This is where people are missing the story.
Right.
This is a very important aspect to the whole thing that took place.
And then those three people
giving us a back door.
Right. Those three people can tell on those three people because they have immunity,
and it's not just hurting them. And it didn't matter that they were hearing a lot of the same names from the same from people.
Right.
All that told them was they're getting the right people.
Right. They're cooperating. They're cooperating. Everybody's cooperating
in order to get out from a life sentence. And who wouldn't? Sake.
No, I understand.
But when it came to a guy like me, they want to know who's in Miami. Where are you jetting off to?
This is the big one. They wanted the big fish.
They wanted to know.
They wanted the buyers. They wanted your Cubans
because they don't want to stop at this level. They want to go right to the source. But here's where the twist comes in on my part. Though I was raised in this Caribbean marijuana industry, in this nonviolent, family-oriented version of what it was, and nonviolence stressing, you throw one of these under the bus, these Cubans or these Colombians or these Jamaicans or these Venezuelans or these Panamanians under the bus or Hondurans, they're going to come after you and do exactly what they're very good at.
Yeah.
And that's kill your mom, your dad, your brother, your cousins, your uncles, and the dog and the goldfish if you got one. That's just how serious this is.
And they knew where you guys lived. They knew where you guys were
and they
at.
know. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So
they did the government.
I said, look, no, that ain't happening, brother. So I was taking my lumps and they were putting a squeeze on me because they wanted this. And, what ultimately wound up happening was Susan Daltuva, the United States attorney that was prosecuting me, said, look, we realize that you're not going to cooperate by way of saying names. So they brought 2 Treasury agents in to meet with me one day. They were taking me out of my jail cell and walking me around to the federal building in this little room. And I'm being interrogated now by U.S. Treasury agents. They want to know. And I said, the minute I saw their gold badges, I said, no, if this is about cooperation, just open that door and take me back home to my cell. But Susan was in the next room and heard me say that. So she busts in and says, no, to me, it's not like that. It's not about cooperation. It's about, and if you're willing to, tell us how you were able to do this for a decade. And we didn't know about it. We couldn't stop it. I said, well, I can tell you dumbasses that, but I won't give you any names. If you can glean from anything that I'm telling you, a name or somebody or something like that, good for you.
Yeah.
More power to you. But I'll tell you how it was done. And the first several questions out of my mouth were simply this to these treasury agents. I said, do you know the geography of Everglades City and Chokoloskee? Yes, we do. I said, good. Do you know how many roads in and out of there are to those two little islands? Well, there's one. I said, yeah, there's one road. Now, how many roads are there from Everglades City and Chokoloskee to Miami? There's one, US 41. That's right. And I said, how do you think we got all those millions of fucking pounds to Miami? I said, they didn't get over there on the backs of pelicans and porpoises, man. It went down that one goddamn road in and out of there. And 99 times out of 100, we're waving at you as the shit's going by. This is what we were doing. This is how stupid
Ask
you were.
the cops.
Then it got to be the amounts. Then it got to be about the money. And, and
so you ended the party for whoever was trying to come do this after you.
Yeah,
for
so
sure.
the information they were getting was invaluable. But that's where Homeland Security comes in now. And my meeting with this guy, having been taken down in that way, and not having to tell on anybody, and in support of helping myself out.
Right.
My cooperation ultimately came by way of giving them this valuable information according to their definition of cooperation.
Right.
That's how I'm on to with the 10-year sentence. But do
you think if you had given up the Connect in Colombia, you would have gotten a lighter sentence?
Fuck.
They probably would have let you go right there. I
would be sitting here probably right now telling you a story.
Yeah. So after
even though let me just interject real quick. Even though there's a lot of joviality in the way I tell the story because we were kids, and it was fun. Don't get me wrong, man. It was shit-ass fun, but it was also highly dangerous.
Sure, of course.
With respects to the law and being shot at by the law. Never did I ever fear for my life for one day of ever doing this until the United States government put a gun against my head. That's when the first time I ever got afraid.
Did the Cubans that you were working with this whole time, the buyers, did they ever go down? Whatever became of them?
We left each other in the dust. We turned our backs and never acknowledged one another from that point on.
But they were the same buyers the whole time you were working. Wow.
Well, what happened was, with regards to them and the buyer thing, was that I wasn't just buying their stuff. I was buying whoever in Miami wanted to buy weed from wherever they wanted it around the Caribbean rim. Yeah. You go through Carlito and Leo. I don't want to know you.
Right.
I don't want to see you. You don't want to know who I am. And I don't bring them to me. I only know Carlito and Leo. So, you bring me their money. I'll go do the job. I'll give it to you. You give it to them. Don't introduce me to anybody.
So you only dealt with Carlito and Leo this whole time. Wow. And they, as far as you know, got away.
Every one of the crews that was working, only several guys in Everglades and one or two guys on each of the crews knew who the guy was. Who went and set up this load. And then it was like me as a kid. I didn't care who the guy was.
And then what about Colombia?
Just pay me.
What about Colombia? When you went down, the guy you were picking up from, the kingpin,
the boss,
who we'll talk about on the Patreon.
Sure.
Whatever happened to him?
Don't know.
Don't know, right?
I literally just, like it never happened, just turned my back, and everybody turned their back on the whole scenario because we got off with our asses, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a very, like I said, peculiar and particular set of circumstances having to take place in order for us, or even me, to be sitting here talking to you. And the government's benevolence, if you will, within the understanding of now we've saturated this Southwest Florida industry by taking out everybody from top to bottom now. We've got the kids, so we've ended it.
Yeah.
And this is what Homeland Security told me that one day we were talking. He says, when they took out me and everybody else in Operation Peacemakers, what they call the third operation, 270 agents now did this one.
Yeah.
And they took me, the first 38, and the domino effect took place with regards to what we're talking about, the cooperation and everybody, this was the end of it. He said, when that happened, something very significant took place, and that was a paradigm shift between Caribbean marijuana and Mexican marijuana. In the late 80s, early 90s, literally ended Caribbean marijuana coming into the United States. That's when Mexican weed started taking on, because the Sinaloa picked up. They've been around forever. There's nothing new about the Sinaloa. Caribbean weed, after us taking out of the picture, went to North Africa and into Europe now because of Mexicans didn't want it.
Right. Of
They
course,
wanna
they didn't
sell
need
their
it. They had
shit.
their own shit.
Exactly. So here comes
Right.
the Mexican brickweed
Makes sense.
and the mids. So they didn't have the way to grow the coca plant.
Right.
They could grow the opium poppy, but they couldn't grow the coca plant. So where'd the coke go? Instead of Miami, now it went to Sinaloa.
Of course. And
Or it went into the Gallardo.
all the government's done throughout the years is just make
They just
Mexican
took it from
cartels
here
stronger.
and put it here.
Yeah. They've just
And
made
I looked this guy dead in the eye and I said, how does it feel having taken this industry out of the hands of generations of families that never fired one shot at you?
And you've given it to
Look
Chapo.
what you did to
You've
it.
given it to guys that are
You know what he
chopping
said?
people's heads off.
He looked me dead in the eye and said they should just legalize this shit.
Mm-hmm.
Be done with it.
Oh,
this
we
was
all know.
6 years ago.
Yeah,
He told
of
me
course.
this, you know, and I said, well, you know, do me another favor. Answer me honestly in percentages. What you think your level of success with regards to marijuana interdiction on our border is? What do you think of that is? He didn't hesitate. He said maybe 1%.
That's all the weed they've stopped.
Success. And I said,
That's all the
thank
weed.
you.
Wow.
I said, thank you. That's the most honest answer anybody has ever given me, because I can tell you absolutely for fact that when we were younger doing our thing, the nightly news would come on during the Reagan administration and giving you the success in terms of percentages. Drugs addiction is down by 30% or, you know, whatever. And we're laughing, thinking, where do you get this number from? What's your baseline?
Yeah.
Because from where we sit, for every 1 pound that you seize from whoever or us, 100 make it through.
At least.
That's your level of, you call this, it's a war of attrition.
You never even
You
got,
just keep throwing it.
you never even had to get on a chase boat. Wild.
No,
All right,
but-
Tim McBride, go. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
The
Thank you
number
for having
one
me, man.
pot hauler in American history in our studio today. Go get his book, Saltwater Cowboys.
Saltwater Cowboy.
Saltwater Cowboy.
The rise and fall of a marijuana empire.
That's it. Go get it on Amazon. It's the only place anybody gets books. It is. I read it in 3 sittings. It's so good.
Right.
It delves into your personal life, prison, all of that stuff, which we're going to talk about on the Patreon.
Sure.
Is there anything else they can follow you on socials? Or anything like that?
I'm at Original Saltwater Cowboy on Instagram. Find me there. And what I'm really fond of now is my book is in its second printing. I've gone from hardcover to paperback now. Hardcovers are very rare and very expensive, and they're being resold on Amazon for astronomical prices. That's such a popular and demanding story to be getting a hold of. If you do purchase the book, remember potholler@gmail.com. That's me, potholler@gmail.com. If you wish to have your book signed after you purchase it, email me, tell me who you are, you bought my book, and I'll easily explain to you how you can get your book signed and sent safely back to you.
Yeah. And if you got
You're not going to get it signed any other way.
And if you got a bale of weed from the 1970s,
It's not
you'll
mine.
sign that too. All right, my man. Thank you so much, dude.
Thank
that
you
was
for
a great
having
episode.
me, man.
Appreciate it.
This was a lot of fun, and God bless everybody out there, and God bless everybody in the weed industry.
Yes, sir. All right. We'll see you next time. Peace out.